All right, we're back. We're a little bit of a different location. We're here in New York, actually, which is, I think it's our first time doing one here, right?
Yeah, we've never been
We've never been in New York, though.
We're in the shop.
We're at the shop, yeah. Jimmy flew up, big birthday weekend. He's been a world traveler, so he hasn't, I don't know, when was the last time you were home for more than a day at a time?
30 days ago. Yeah, I know.
He was in Barcelona.
Yeah, so he's been traveling around the world. But yeah, no, we flew back here. We decided to come up. Shout out Kay for having a birthday. And
big 30th bash last night.
Dude, huge. Biggest birthday party I've ever been to. Shout out Sea-Dog. But yeah, no, this is going to be sick. So we decided to come down here, check out the File Loud shop. Check out New York, had a bitchin' dinner.
Got to go to Kith.
Felt like
got your new swag on,
dude. I feel like a legend, dude. Got the treats, baby. Got the painters.
You painting houses while you're up here?
Yeah. So, yeah, man, we're in it. We're vibing.
All right. Well, episode 23, big 23 guy over here, myself actually. So that's pretty cool. But before we get into that, it's been a little bit of a break since our last one, but we appreciate all the feedback. JP's podcast was a fun one for us, obviously knowing him for so long, and there's a lot of stories that we knew, but we learned a lot. Even I think we talked about it afterwards. There's a lot there to kind of think about and unpack, and we could have probably gone for another 4 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like we could have kept going, but it was getting late, and it sets up for like a part two. But it's crazy to hear all the feedback. This thing's been spiraling, like we said last time. We're deep in the ether right now, and we're growing at a rapid rate. And
Jimmy's
we're trying,
just checking the algorithm daily.
We're trying. We got our mascot here, and let's get this thing going. But before we jump into that, as always, let's thank our sponsors. Law Tigers have been with us since ever. If you're ever in a motorcycle accident or somebody in a motorcycle accident, please call 1-800-LAW Tigers. They are America's motorcycles lawyers. No cost to the rider. So please call Law Tigers, 1-800-LAW Tigers. And then UASA, the most trusted battery in power sports since 1979. For over 45 years, UASA has delivered power, reliability, and passion at every turn. So check out UASA batteries. Check your motorcycle dealers near you. And please, if you support them, they support the pod. So, but let's get into it, dude.
Let's get into it. We've got a unique one this time around. Last time we did something like this was with Chloe, and we've always talked about as we get to grow the podcast more and more, we want to get more and more guests on that are, not just racers and people who are just, avid enthusiasts or supporters of the sport or involved in the sport behind the scenes that people don't realize, and start putting some names to faces and whatnot. So very stoked to have my very good friend Dan Connor on the podcast. Dan, James has been telling everyone you're the owner of Supreme.
No, I have financials that prove otherwise. Yeah.
What is your official title, actually?
I'm a design director at Supreme, and I'm not the design director. There's several of us, but design director at Supreme.
Of everything? Or
What's
just
that?
outerwear? I thought it was outerwear specifically.
Yeah. I mean, sorry. We kind of have different little categories going. My background is in like technical outerwear, but I've really done a ton of shit, and which has led me to this spot. But yeah, on paper, I'm kind of like design director of technical outerwear.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was because we were like talking about it, like one, you're like a ghost on the internet. As well. It's not like you like.
I found like one story on you.
Yeah, totally.
Which is kind of the vibe I know over there, and in your field, it's not like not very self prophecy kind of thing. It's like pretty low key.
I think
for most people
now, most people say in their Instagram program thing like what they do, but we don't do that, or we don't do that as a team. Basically, it's no one's kind of like in the spotlight, like raising their hand. And it's really good in a lot of ways. But a lot of people, they're really pushing it from all angles, which is cool. But yeah, not how I personally do stuff. And I'm just old enough that I've always kind of kept a very low social media presence, but I use it all day, every day, like everybody else. But I have a different take on it in a way. I use it a lot for work. I use it a lot for a lot of different ways, and I'm also like very weirdly like anal about it too, where I have like a personal one, a moto one, a work one, like lots. It's crazy. Yeah.
And is that changed over, the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, where people have come out in that world and more like, put the name to the face of who's designed maybe something that's gone viral, or is that more brand specific?
I think it depends on what someone's doing and who they're doing it with. If they're doing their own thing, they're going to put themselves in the spotlight the whole time. That's kind of how things are now. And I think that if you're doing it for a brand, it's like, it's up to you. A lot of people are like really proud about what they do, and I am as well. But it's like, I don't there's a clear delineation sometimes between personal and professional. And yeah. I mean, it depends on what you're doing. It depends on what you're doing. Like a lot of kids that are doing their own cool thing, like cool, they're gonna kind of blast it on all angles.
Do people in the industry know? Like in the motorcycle world, like if you're on a bad bike but you're super talented, people in the industry know. Is it like, do people in the industry know who's come up with designs, or is that still blocked as well because it's the brand?
I don't know, man, because it's you kind of get into, there's so much kinds of design. You know what I mean? There's fashion, there's any capitalist venture has a design team doing something, whether they're paying some outside people to kind of like do something, there's so many different levels to that. And I think, like most things, if someone's grinding and working hard, like regardless of what they're doing, it starts to show, and I think, from me and my world, the background of like skateboarding, where it's like, it's about those relationships that you forge when you're kind of grinding, doing whatever with whoever. And then that's what kind of like, I think that's kind of like to what you were asking. I think that kind of, that's the thing with most kind of work projects where it kind of like starts to
snowball, maybe.
Yeah, totally.
Do you like, I think where James also is kind of like curious, like, is it kind of like its own community where people know and respect who's who? Like there's people who are out there, like even in our sport, people are like, after the followers or the clout or whatever. And then there's guys who just go out and do their work, and they're just like Jay Gagne kind of deal.
Right,
where like he doesn't exist,
yeah.
outside of the racetrack in terms of, caring about a profile or whatever. But people obviously know how good he is and how good of a guy he is. Whereas there's other people who are kind of the opposite, where everything is, flashy and got to be put out there for the world to see.
Yeah.
Is there kind of like that type of thing where like there's like a...
There is. But, I come from Portland, Oregon too. So it's like, if you look at that place, which is like a Nike, Adidas place, smaller fish tank, but there's this guy from Nike, there's this guy from Adidas, and like people kind of know who those people are in this like smaller scale. If you get to a LA or a New York City thing and globally, it depends on what it is. Again, fashion, of course, there's people that are kind of in the spotlight and like always at the events and all this shit. But if you get it down to like moto, skateboarding, all these things, it's kind of more of a subculture umbrella where I think people that are heads and into it, they kind of know like who's doing what. But I'm sure we'll get to it too. It's like maybe not so much a moto. I don't know. Like I think you gotta really like, there's kind of segments to all this stuff. And with skateboarding and in particular, like watching that kind of grow, it's always been such a graphic thing. So there's been such a core element of like aesthetics and like really vibe shit that was like kind of telling this story of this thing kind of evolving in a very like subcultural way. And I think that when you break it down to these smaller batches, there's definitely like people know, and it's also getting different now too, because skateboarding is not subculture anymore. Skateboarding is just part of like most things, is kind of like grown to this thing that it's just part of popular culture. Right. So, do people like, how heady do people get with stuff now? Do they care about certain things? Like, do they pay attention to the point where they're like, oh, I wonder who did this, Or is it just like a thing, you know?
How surface level is it?
Yeah, exactly. I think heady, kind of cool young people, they're always going to kind of want to know what's going on like behind whatever they think's cool, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I actually don't even know how long you've been in the industry. I know you come from obviously Portland and you had like a skateboarding background, which we can dive into. How long have you actually been doing fashion stuff?
Well, I mean,
call it fashion?
No.
Okay,
Right.
yeah.
No.
I know,
I don't.
dude. We're
What do
so
you call
far
it?
away.
Clothing?
I know. I
don't
just call myself a designer, you know. And we can get into kind of the nuances of that and maybe what people, think Supreme is, but a lot of people would say fashion. It's not really, you know. But I started doing design stuff. You know, I grew up skateboarding, I grew up snowboarding, and because of the things I was kind of mentioning, is there's very much this aesthetic. It had like so much vibe that like we were all very like tuned into that. And as I got older, and I'm sure you guys have thought about this with like people that haven't become professional racers, where it's like, okay, I always thought that I didn't always think, but you know, I guess the idea was like, oh, maybe I'll do something with skateboarding. And then you get to a certain age and you're like, that's not happening, you know.
In terms of actually, like,
you're not gonna make a living doing it. Or I think when you're young, you just you don't think about things far enough where you're like, okay, well, you know, what am I? You get to a point where you're like, what am I gonna do? You know, my first job I ever had was at a skateboard shop, like freshman year in high school, and so I had that going, and then while that was happening, you know, like high school on, it became like I'm hanging out with 24 to 28-year-old kids every single day, drinking beer, smoking weed, and like from a very young age, like it was this whole thing. It was like this whole kind of cool thing that kind of started to become like the party kind of started to take over from the like skateboarding aspect of it, or become maybe as you're like evolving as like a teen into your 20s and stuff, things start to shift where it's like you're not skating all day every day anymore. You're not snowboarding all the time. You're like, you know, as you get older, you're like, let's go to this party, you know, right. and that's like, that becomes fun. But that skewed pretty drastically for me, you know, and
it can become too fun.
Well, and yeah, it became too fun, and it became like dangerous, and like crazy shit was happening, losing friends, doing crazy shit myself, and like I got to this point where all the while while that was happening, I've always like had interest in kind of like design and aesthetic, even though I didn't think about it specifically like that. But while that was happening, you know, me and some of my friends were always having conversations about like, oh shit, it'd be cool if you did that. You know, wouldn't this be cool? And even working at the skate shop, like helping out with like some of the tee designs, or like, you know, being that hands-on with product all the time, and like paying attention to everything that came out of a box that came into that place, and like really geeking on all that. That was always kind of there for me, you know, as a part of this thing that I was into. So while shit was getting crazy, also some of those relationships and stuff started. Those people that were slightly older are starting to do some more adult shit and have jobs at places. And even though they saw me being a fucking lunatic, they're like, hey, would you be down to like try to do something? And so I started to have a couple opportunities, and as things were getting like really haywire, and I took one of them. It was an internship at Columbia Sportswear, which is like a big outerwear company for the Northwest. Yeah. They made some like famous jackets in the 80s and shit, you know, like the Bugaboo jacket and shit. Anyway,
was that this era? Was that, I don't know.
No. This was later.
I don't know what stage we're talking about.
This is much later than that. But yeah, so I got a job internship there with some close friends of mine that I knew, and it just, at the time, it was like really getting dark for me. But I also had this thing going to where, you know, a few crazy things happened, and it came to this point where it was like, okay, I should probably, and I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, but it got really crazy. A few very important conversations were had. A few like life-changing incidents happened. And I decided I have to stop doing all that shit, which I did. And in a very short amount of time, in like a 6-month period, like my life like did a 180 for the positive, where it was like, oh, okay, this job that I was like fucking off on and like not caring about, I have all the time. I have something else to focus on. I focused on that, and like in 6 months, I was like, wow. Not only the job shit, but I was like, I've made the correct decision, and with the help of others, you know. But I've realized that I need to like stop doing this so that I could do something else. And it's not because I was dying to like start this professional career, but at that time, very pivot, like, you know, I think timing becomes this very like omnipresent part of life, right? Where things happen at certain times, relationships, like careers, all this stuff. But at that time, something happened for me, and I was like, oh shit, okay, cool. So I started going down that design path, and it started moving quick. You know,
what year was that? Would you say?
That would be mid 2000s.
Mid 2000s. So
yeah.
And were you in Portland this whole time?
Yeah, I was born in Salem, Oregon, just south of there.
Okay.
And but as soon as I got out of high school, I moved to Portland, and from there, and I was always like, Portland's a very cool city, and like had lots of shit going on. So even when I was younger, I was there all the time. Really cool skate scene and culture. And then, you know, Oregon's really great because you're an hour from the beach. You're an hour from Mount Hood, which is like this massive, amazing mountain. So really cool, like snowboarding shit. Yeah. So at that time, it was like, I kind of lost my focus a little bit there.
So like what got you into skating specifically? Like what was it? Was it a whole vibe, or like
because skateboarding and snowboarding, like and in the 80s were like this thing that was like, oh shit, what is this, you know? So you know, the 80s was skateboarding like coming into this thing, and in the late 80s skateboarding was like crazy and big, and like this whole new thing that had like industry around it, you know. And then going into the 90s, you know, snowboarding was kind of back quite a few years as far as development and shit like that. But you know, those things started to kind of bubble up, and for me it was just something cool, you know. A kid in the neighborhood had the skateboard, and it was like, oh shit, what's going on here? And I got into it, and this will be a common theme in my life, but even as a kid, I was like geeked on it. I was like 100% like really into it. And like, you know, I lived across the street from a grade school, so I could go skate there every single day, you know. And it was just like me and two kids down the street just fucking around at the school, like
a skate park.
No. Like a public school where it's like had some curb cuts, a couple little things of stairs, a loading dock to just like roll off of to flat. Like this is like, you know, early, like there was no skate parks then. This was the 80s. There were skate parks everywhere, and it was this big thing. Then that shit like went away, and like, not that it wasn't popular, it's like they tore that shit down, you know? So there wasn't that aspect of it until quite a bit later.
Well, because didn't it kind of like skating at one point become like, if you were a skater, you were like bad
kid?
Yeah, totally.
It was whether you just like to skate or whatever, but it was kind of like you're
for
out
sure
fucking off.
But most little niche things then were like heavy metal, bad, you're a bad person. You know what I mean? It was like, then it was like, there was no like, well, you know, maybe they're not murderers. It's like, no, they're murderers, you know, like, it was a different time, you know.
What was your first board that you bought?
Mark Gonzalez, Vision Streetwear, or Vision Mark Gonzalez board. Yeah, the classic one with the head. People that know will know
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
You
I,
never
st-
really
I
got into
still,
skating.
So, well, I tried, but I sucked bad. I was a big snowboarder.
I still have it in my shop over here, which is crazy because this is a wild story. But years later in my hometown, I was with a friend, and like 15 years later, he was working at this like metal shop, and we were in the metal shop, and they were using this skateboard to haul around shit in the shop to like roll it around, and it was leaning up against the wall, and I was like, what the fuck? And like the stickers that I put there, and I was like, I lost it. It was crazy. It's in the shop right now.
crazy.
well,
Yeah.
I gotta see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that impressive.
Yeah, but
it's
it's still-
personally very important. Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
super
totally,
cool.
totally.
Did you like so back in that time? You're saying just skating was just skating. Like you just were doing it, like trying to do like what was the back then? Was there were no leagues or like there wasn't.
No,
like,
and it
this
was
is before all of that.
Yeah, and I mean, most people that grew up skateboarding don't care about the competitive nature of it. It's about the whole kind of like lifestyle vibe shit, you know? And so especially at that time, like sure there was contest skating in like the late 80s, but this died out in the 90s. Was like vert ramps were like a big deal, and it was like that was like a big show, and like people were into it. But that died off like drastically in the 90s. It's always been there, but yeah, it was more about just like hanging out with friends and like just, you know, same as like I rode BMX bikes for a while too. It's the same vibe where you're in this like suburban like place. You're gonna go hang out with kids at your age. You're either gonna like throw rocks at windows. You're gonna go like play baseball. You're gonna play basketball, or you're gonna, you know, it was that thing, you know. And I played sports a little bit too, but this was just like go out your door and go across the street and skate, you know, or just do it in front of your house, sidewalk. It was, yeah.
Did how far? So when you said you kind of geeked on it, like you just got fully locked in, did that just become like you go to school, you come back, you skate?
Yeah.
Just every
Totally.
day?
Yeah. Every day. Yeah.
That's wild.
Winter, summer, like all of it, you know? Yeah.
And so when you got to that point where you had to kind of that crossroads, you know, life-wise later on, were you like up until then hoping you were gonna go somewhere with skating?
No, it wasn't like hanging onto that, but it was like you're doing it, and it's still part of your everyday thing. And you know, I skated until my whole life, basically, until not that long ago, where it was like I'm done. But
Like, were you sponsored and whatnot?
not really, but it's like I worked at a shop, you know, so it was like flow vibes, you know. It was like once you work at a shop, and then you know people that work at the brands, and then you go to like back then, you know, I was talking about it. Ryan and I went to EICMA, and it was like old vibes for us, where it was like when we used to go to skate trade shows and shit like that, it was like insanity, and we were like making some of those correlations. But yeah, it was like, I'm sorry, what was
How far along you were in terms of like, I don't know, I'm trying to imagine at like your mental perspective in terms of like how seriously you were taking that as an avenue,
Right.
and like,
Yeah.
was there people in your like group that were actually like going like, you know, because it's kind of like one friend, you're like, okay, well, he's doing it, I could probably, you know, maybe I could do that too, kind of thing, and then you came to that point.
Up to, you know, after high school, I knew I was not going to do anything on a skateboard, but I was going to continue to do it because it was just like part of life, you know what I mean? But I was like, okay, I'm young, I'm working at a skate shop, I'm like, I can, especially in that time, and especially in a place like Portland, it's like you don't need a whole lot to be like good, and it's more about just like having fun and like doing cool shit. So that's what it was. We had friends that clearly were like sponsored insane skaters, and like that was amazing. But I think without being conscious of it, you start to formulate these ideas that you're like, okay, just because you're not like the kid killing it doesn't mean that there can't be something there for you. Someone's filming, someone's doing graphics, someone's, you know, there's opportunity. And especially then it was like a lot of companies were small. So you could get in on some sort of company like new-ish, and be doing stuff that was fucking cool, Yeah.
I think that's like one of the things that motorcycling is missing a little bit. I think it's kind of interesting. Like I think as a culture, there's definitely a culture there, but it doesn't have that aspect to it where like, when I was younger, I was into the car thing, and there's so many people now that I know that I'm still in touch with that just went to stupid car shows, but like there was the one kid who was filming all the time, and there was the other kid who was doing stickers and like, designing wraps for the cars, and then now like one of them, is a photographer for Tate McRae, on tour, and another one's like directing Travis Scott music videos, but it started at like just doing stupid car videos at one point, and it's like that, but it has the opportunity to go this way where I feel like now a little bit is like the kids are getting into it and going, okay, well maybe I'm not gonna make it racing, but I can become a videographer, like the Great Fam or that kind of route, or I'm gonna start making graphics, whatever. But it's just, it doesn't have the same ecosystem as like skating or cars or music, where it's got like this spin-off effect,
Yeah, and I mean, you guys would know better than I because you grew up in that. But I think that it is a different. You guys were kids in the paddocks and stuff, but it's not the same as walking out your front door and walking down the street. It's a detached vibe from that, right? Yeah. Just because of, I think it reflects the effort that goes into the kind of motorsports, which is maybe different for either kids that live in the middle of nowhere, Midwest US, that they can ride a dirt bike out their front door down to their boy's place and like rip all day. Like that's a little bit different, but maybe you don't have that, like with the lack of density like that. It's like, oh, well, no one's maybe starting their own thing in wherever the fuck. Yeah. I think that's there's differences, like nuances with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think motocross culture has a little bit of that flavor to it, more so, but definitely not road racing.
No, it for sure does. Like, because you go to the track and you have like guys that just show up and they're just vibing, right? You have excuse me, you've got like, there's definitely that like a culture for the moto track that are the fastest dude there that would, can't even make the C gate on a reel, but he's wicked fast, and everyone's like just around, and it's like, you got your 10 guys, you're out just in the back of a truck vibing.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Barbecuing.
Yeah.
And so like at this time, were motorcycles like involved in your life whatsoever?
Yeah, so a little bit. I mean, I think any young kid, especially male, is like, fuck, motorcycles are cool, But my family's from Western Montana, so we would go to Montana every summer, pretty much every summer, like my whole life. And my family's from this town called Anaconda, which is a small, old, kind of like dead mining town. And, the one kid that I kind of like clicked with out there had a Honda dirt bike, and like seeing that and then like riding it and then watching him like rip these hills and like letting me ride it and all this shit, I was always like, oh, this is so cool, But then where I lived and kind of the other people that I knew, that was not an opportunity for me, like no one in my zone was riding dirt bikes. My parents were never going to be like, even if I got like jacked on it and like I needed dirt bike, I doubt that it would have ever happened, But I still went to the dirt bike store to like go walk around and like look in it, like when you used to like, when they were very kind of like traditional American kind of like motorcycle shop, but like a counter, shit behind it,
grumpy lady,
Oakley's, and just like checking out the gear, and I'm like, I don't know anything about this, but like all that shit was like cool to me.
No fear.
I mean, lots of stuff in those places. Then it was crazy.
I think that that was a cool time to experience that stuff, because it has a lot of those like mom and pop shops. There's not a lot of that around anymore, where kids can just kind of like stumble in and just go like cruise around and
but
stuff.
I mean, that was exactly the vibe I got when I went to your family store the first time, and that was like a big thing where it's like, if you living in the city, moving from Portland, I moved to Boston first for a little while, and then coming to New York, which we can get to, but I took I took a break from motorcycles for a while, and then like going into your guys' shop, it was like it had that same vibe, you know, like to a T.
Grumpy lady behind the counter.
No, not even that, but like, oh shit, look at all this shit. Yeah. What is this Jordan suit? You know, like that's the kind of stuff where I was like, whoa, this is crazy, you know?
So what got you into besides that, like what got you into like sport bikes? What was like did you follow like racing at all, or did you nothing?
No, I didn't, but there was just that kind of like motorcycles are cool thing like underlying the whole time. But also when I was crazy, I made a few I made I couldn't drive for quite a while. Okay. So, you know, I couldn't drive for quite a while. So it did get to a point after I kind of like turned a corner on that shit, and then was just like riding a bicycle and like taking the train. I was working at, you know, where was I? Yeah, so I got to a point where I needed some intermediate transportation.
Yes, yeah.
And I was like, I don't want a car. And literally in Portland was really sweet in the fact that like I didn't really need a car. Me and my boys had this whole great setup. We had these indoor skate parks that we'd go to that were close to where I live. I lived in the middle of the city. I could get anywhere. In Portland, you can get anywhere in 15 minutes. You know what I mean? And so it wasn't super necessary, but I was like, I need some sort of transportation. So I went to a Moto Corsa and I was looking at monsters, Ducati monsters. Didn't know shit about them, but I knew Ducatis were cool. And, you know, that was like early, like mid 2000s Ducati monsters. So still kind of, you know, like matte black was like the new shit, where it was like really cool, like the round headlight, like a really, from a design point of view. And I wasn't splitting hairs like that at that time. I was like, whoa, this is cool. And I went into the place and it was like, I was like, how much is this thing? And I don't even remember how much it was, but I was like, what do you have to do to get this though? And they're like, you know, they're like,
sign and drive.
I was
baby.
like, I don't have a driver. I don't have a motorcycle license. They're like, you know, like, so I fucking left with a monster. You know, I left with a monster. I rode it home, and it was like, I mean, I could ride a motorcycle, but I'd never ridden a street bike in my life. So it was like, you know, I kind of fucking like petered home on it, and then immediately was just psyched, dude. Very psyched.
Was it the same sort of vibe when you got like when you saw skateboarding? Like that's
no,
not
only because I was so much older at that. You know, I was like literally a child then. So this was like, you know, it was cool in a way that it was like a kind of a new part of my like very young adult life, where I was like, okay, party's over. You know, party's over. Things are looking good and feeling good, and like I'm fucking riding a motorcycle around. That's cool. Know, like, and you know, as you guys know, it like rabbit holes quickly from there. It's like, all right, I'm putting exhaust on this. You know, I'm doing that sort of shit, and it was cool. Portland was like and so as I got into it, there was really interesting shit happening there. Speedy Moto was there. I don't know if you guys do you remember Speedy Moto?
I remember the name, yeah.
They made a lot of Ducati shit, but a lot of shit for other bikes too. Yeah. It was like a machine shop.
Yeah, there's that orange logo, right?
Yeah, they had an orange logo. Yeah. They made a lot of like billet.
Yeah, they sponsored the teams back in.
Yeah, and then this office that I worked at when I was doing my second outerwear job was around the corner from Moto Sizz, which at that time in Portland, they had this like, you know about those guys? Like,
the electric bike guys.
Yeah, the early, you know? Yeah. And I forget what the dude's deal is, but he had a lot of bread, you know? And like they had this space that you would look in the windows and be like, what the fuck's going on in here? But I ended up going through there and like seeing that stuff and like meeting the Speedy Moto guys and going there and seeing like, you know, CNC machines up close and like all that sort of stuff. And I was like, super cool. And there was other cool shit happening there around that time too, you know.
And what did your parents like? Were they anti-bike at all?
No, I mean, they didn't love it, but the fact that I was not like
Doing the
almost
other shit.
dying partying all the time, big step up.
Like-
Big step up. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I feel like Portland's a cool place because it for whatever reason has all these like subcultures. Like it's not
For
known
sure.
for like one. I mean, it's known for shoes, I guess, from Nike or whatever. But
Yeah.
but it's not like one particular
No,
culture.
it's
But it's got a lot of subcultures, like these small like niche things.
music, like lots of stuff. Because it was I just think it was an interesting place where a lot of young people could live in like cool houses for relatively cheap, have like a decent job that like you can kind of do whatever you want. It was super fun. Yeah.
How did you guys even end up there from Montana?
My parents left Montana and went to San Francisco, and my mom's sister was in Eugene, which is kind of south of Portland and Salem, and so they just wanted to be closer. They didn't last long in Western Montana, a small town, to like San Francisco.
It's a big change.
And they were like, "Whoa." They didn't know what was going on. So they went to Oregon and. They just, my dad transferred his job and Salem was as close as he could get, So, that's where they went.
And were either of them in any type of design or?
No. My parents were, my mom was a community college teacher her whole life.
Wow.
And my dad worked for the IRS his whole life.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah.
Big tax guy.
Yeah, totally. So
you're in Portland, you're riding bikes. Are you doing design work at the time?
Yeah, I was fully doing design stuff.
Okay.
So I had that little internship quickly turned into a real job, and then
With who?
So I started working at that same place. It's like a kind of like internship type situation turned into a job. And then this woman that I was working for there left to go to this other place, and then very quickly hit me up to come with her. So really, in a short amount of time, it was like, okay, things are happening, I'm making moves, and like left to go do that. And that was kind of like a prime Portland time for me, where me and we're just skating tons still. Portland was so fun then. There was like so much cool shit going on. And I get it's a little blurry for me too, remembering the like absolute craze like fading into this part too. But it was when I kind of like recentered after all that shit. We just had such a good crew and like scene in Portland where it was skating all the time, going to cool shows, doing whatever, traveling a little bit, doing design shit, riding motorcycles places. And like me and my really good friend Matt Savage, like he's the one friend that I had at that same time that was like, oh cool, I'm getting an SV650. And me and him were just linked, so it was like fill a not big backpack with like a sleeping bag and like something else, and then go ride your bike somewhere you've never been before. So we were going like to the desert, we were going like up into Washington, we were going to like the San Juan Islands. We were just like cruising around, having a good time, And
just you're sleeping on the road?
We would like find a camp spot, sometimes literally pull off the road and like sleep somewhere, and like yeah, it was like being a kid, man. It was so much fun. It was insane.
I think that stuff's so. I mean, obviously, neither of us have ever. I've never done anything like
Neither
that.
have I.
Yeah.
James, but like,
I haven't done anything since then.
Yeah.
But I think about that now, and I'm like, fuck, I should go do that.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the big things why like the Harley thing for me is I've specifically when I got involved in this recent is trying to get into that more of that culture that is riding, packing, saddlebags full of
Totally.
whatever it is and going I don't know, a couple days and riding for, whatever, 200-300 miles and, campsite, have a
Yeah.
good time, have a couple beers with, a crew.
I mean,
and-
that must have felt great for you, where it's like a kind of like, oh shit, it's like a different perspective on it again. you
well,
know?
that's what I want to do. I haven't done it yet. So, that's
Still working towards it.
Well, it's winter, so
We'll get there.
let's wait it out if you want.
No, but I think that's like the cool. I mean, racing is great, but it's not really like from a exploration or like actual like visceral feeling outside of like you have to be a certain level of willing to do things on the racetrack to get like that feeling out of it.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I think
well,
everyone
I mean,
gets a general
it's
sense of it,
interesting.
but
It's interesting to hear you guys talk about it because that's kind of the like fundamental motorcycle consumer experience that actually you guys actually have
exactly,
no
that's what I'm
experience
saying.
in, where it's like,
yeah.
oh, maybe you guys should try that sometime.
Yeah,
and I think not because I'm a professional racer, but because of life stuff. It's like I haven't done that, or like live in New York City. It's like I've never ridden a motorcycle in New York City.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to,
Yeah.
but I'm sure it's maybe fun somehow. Like,
I think it's interesting that you bring that up, Corey, because it's like we go to the track, come home, and as kids you want to be whatever, world champ or AMA champ or just win a race or whatever, and you roll up that whole deal, and you actually never really understand I mean, you probably did more because you were in a dealership.
Yeah.
But for me, like I never really even understood motorcycling as a culture.
Yeah.
And now going to Thailand and going to all these different places and going
Right.
like, holy smokes, like
Yeah.
this is so much cooler than just like racing on a track.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that comes with age too, but like
Right.
it's been a very big eye-opening for me, an eye-opener to go and see these countries and go to these different places where people truly love just riding.
For sure.
Like your buddy, your next door neighbor, it's fucking 50 degrees out, and he's like, yo, I'm going for a ride. I'm like, what, bro? I was like, you actually like riding that much? And he goes, dude, I love it. And I was like,
for sure.
holy smokes.
On a bike with no suspension.
I'm like,
like,
dude.
yeah.
But like, it's different.
For sure, Southeast Asia, it's like you see a different context of like life with not just motorcycles,
Two
but
wheels.
2 wheels, where it's like a swarm and sea of people around you, like flowing and relatively like not that crazy, but it looks insane.
It's like fish, like
Yeah,
big
yeah.
gaggles of fish, and they just like
works out somehow.
They
Yeah,
just,
no,
dude, they
I
just
mean-
like you literally every stoplight in Thailand, in Bangkok specifically, you just like 10 seconds, it's like,
Yeah.
like 50 fucking scooters roll up.
Yeah, yeah,
and like,
totally.
dude, all the cars and everything are just like back, and there's a whole little just like, I don't know, like area for these scooters, and there's just
Yeah.
like people it's like a race every time it fucking goes green, dude. These guys are just it's like it's such a different, I don't know, it's weird.
Crazy.
It is nuts.
Yeah, it's super crazy.
But I didn't see one accident.
No, I mean, I'm sure there's crazy ones.
Yeah.
Because they're also not wearing a whole lot. But
Dude. Well, it's like Uber as well. Just tangent, but Uber over there is like called Grab, and you literally go and just get on the
Yeah.
back of somebody's scooter. Like there's no like vetting the dude. Like, hey, are you a good scooter driver?
How long have you been riding?
It's just like literally these people are just like, and then they're just like these females just side saddle. Dudes just on the back, and
sure.
they're like, yo, down there, and they're just.
Yeah.
I'm like, I would never do that.
Different lifestyle.
it's crazy.
No, but it is cool though. I think the closest otherwise that we got to experience that was going racing flat track at Sturgis.
Yeah,
'Cause
that was-
you kind of get engulfed in that, a little bit of a different lifestyle, but
For sure.
just seeing like the whole going out and riding and then coming back to the campground and drinking as much as you can and falling asleep wherever
Yeah.
you lie down, but still
I
equally
mean,
sick in its own right. you
I
know?
mean, it'd be cool for you guys at some point to like tap into that and be like, oh, the two of you should go on a like weekend or shit where it's
I'd love
like
to, yeah.
you don't even get to pick what bike it is, and like you just throw some gear in a bag and
Yeah.
like go, I don't know, somewhere.
It would
I
be
think
sick.
that's the only hard part about racing is it's like the last thing you want to do when you get home after. I mean, especially like your case, you've been gone
For
on
sure.
the road, not even actually racing, but just gone on the road for a month. It's like, oh, I don't want to go home and get on a bike
No,
again
I
to
know,
go travel.
I know.
So it's like and then you always have those things in the back of your head. It's like, well, maybe like when I'm done doing this, or when something else happens, like I'll have some time, or
For sure.
But you never have time.
But you never have time.
No.
It's just the
I
next
think.
And
I
that's
think.
relative to just getting older, you know. It's like it's dwindling. And then prioritizing what you do at that time is like, it gets tricky.
Yeah, no, it's one of those. I think we need to do it. I think it would be really cool to just, I don't know, pick a couple dots.
Yeah.
And just whatever we're on, or even like I've always had a dream to go to Alaska and ride through like all the fire roads or whatever, and,
that'd be crazy.
and just kind of, I don't know, stand in a river, fly fish.
Yeah.
But so going back though, so like at the time you were in that zone in Portland designing, forgive my ignorance, like are you drawing things? Like are you like what's how do you design
at that time? I mean, it was all computer based at that time, but when I first started doing, a big thing that I want to say too is I was really fortunate where it's like I never went to school for this. I tried to, but it was when I was still crazy, and literally I was like up all night, like then I go to class. It was a waste, and it didn't last very long. But I was very fortunate in that, and I think this is hard to come by these days, but being around people that are like, you want to do a jacket? And I'm like, well, I'll know how to do is like some graphic stuff. And they're like, putting pockets on a jacket, it's not rocket science, It's like, why don't you give it a crack? And so I was lucky enough to be with people like that, And so we did actually we drew jackets just because it was like fast and easy to get like rough ideas, just like sketching pockets and shit. And it was very much like a mentorship kind of scenario at that point where it was like, here's how I kind of do it. A big part of design is process and like seeing, there's a million different ways to do everything, but every designer kind of has their own process, and it depends on what you're doing too. But like catching glimpses of that, and then kind of like latching onto it. But yeah, I was drawing shit, but I also was like, at that time, computers, Macs, like design. Macs were like very specifically like computers kind of for design, it felt like. And so I was always like really into that shit. And aesthetically, they were just these very cool objects, that earlier Mac stuff. And so there was that aspect to it. So I was always kind of like latched onto computers and kind of trying to figure some shit out more for like fun projects with buddies, and then it started to evolve into this stuff. So I knew what I was doing. The first 6 months of actual doing design shit, I like really figured it out. And then it kind of after that outerwear job, I don't think I ever drew anything ever again. Very little.
Okay.
Just because you didn't have to, or because you had people?
It's just things kind of evolved, and it's like as you start doing, it depends on what you're doing and how much shit you're trying to get through in certain amounts of time. But the computer is just like the easy way, obviously. Okay. But I know a lot of like Illustrator type people and shit that they're always drawing. It's a big part of it, even if it's on a fucking iPad or whatever now. But it's like, and I've done a little bit of that and tried to like put that into things more recently. But yeah, it's mostly with the computer now.
So you started in outerwear.
That was kind of my introduction to like apparel design, which I'd never done any of that before, other than like some t-shirt graphics and stuff like that.
Okay. And when you're talking about, sorry, but like when you're talking about like pockets, like actually, what do you talk? You like just put where to put them?
A jacket is a top with a hood and sleeves. Sometimes no hood, and then it's like, what does it look like? Like, and especially if you think about snowboarding at that time, it was like cargo pockets, or like, how is this gonna look? Like what do you want to? What are you kind of referencing? Or to be honest, at that point, I was kind of just like, we were just like drawing shit. We weren't really like being super referential as far as like what shit was coming from. I knew very well, because I had been around snowboarding for such a long time. I knew what the aesthetic was and what the vibe was. And so it came pretty naturally at that point, where it's like, oh, this could be cool. Because for me, I'm able to be like, oh, I like this, Yeah.
And how do you? That's like I think the hardest thing, from the stuff that I've experienced with design is like, how do you differentiate what you like versus what you think people will like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I was first doing that job specifically, they put me on the stuff that was for like big box stores. So it's like the shit that's cheapest that like isn't that cool usually. But instead of like, I don't think I thought about it this like cohesively, but I think I was like, oh, okay, well, just because it's a cheap jacket doesn't mean it has to suck, you know? So I kind of took it as a challenge, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to do this, which will be cool if you're walking into, you know, G.I. Joe's, which was like the regional Big Five or Dick's or whatever at that time in that area, or like, you know, some whatever. I think that was probably dead by then, but it was whatever the fuck place, you know? It's like, I just kind of took it as a challenge. And then going forward, I mean, I think you have to, it all depends on, it really depends on what you're doing, because if you're doing this like more niche thing, and like my whole career is basically pretty niche stuff that has become more popular because of what I was saying earlier, where it's just part of all these things are so big that it's all kind of part of the same shit now, you know?
Yeah.
But it's always, as a designer, it's always a challenge, because it's not about what you would wear all the time. And at the risk of sounding like an asshole when I say this, you know, if you're into cool shit and like you have a good taste level, which is a very subjective thing to say, but it's like, maybe it's not maybe it is right to just design something that you think is cool. And, you know, I think you do kind of start out that way. And then as things, depending on the job or the project or whatever, you got to start to be like, okay, well, because the shit I do now, often it's not shit that I want to do. It's not shit that I want to wear, but it's a different thing, you know. And I gotta think about that.
Like a box you kind of have to work within a little bit, like
for sure. And being relevant and knowing what's going on, and like that whole thing is like, as you evolve as a designer, and as you get older, you have to be able to let go of certain aspects of creativity, or you know who to fucking bother about, who to ask to help out with that, or, you know, you start to, things kind of shift a little bit, where it's like trying to figure out what's the right move.
That's kind of interesting. And talking about that, is it harder now than it was when, because of technology, because everything is so accessible and there's so many ideas and there's so many things that you can create so quickly? Is it becoming harder to, I don't know, create cool things because it's so accessible? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're thinking. And the first thing that pops into my mind for that is the fact that there's less like nuanced flavors of shit around the world, because you used to go, if you went to Tokyo for the first time, you were absolutely blown away, and you saw shit that like, you're like, whoa, this is crazy. If you went to Paris, if you went to Berlin, London, all these places were much more insular, regionally, and vibe, that they carried this specific kind of thing. And now everyone sees that all the time, so that doesn't really exist in the same way anymore. So I think like, I don't think it's harder really. I think what's harder is the pace of shit, and like figuring out what to latch onto aesthetically that is cool when you're talking about it, and like figuring it out, and it's still cool when it comes out. Because, you know, I feel like the speed of things has picked up to the point where it's like, that is maybe trickier than it used to be, where for the longest time it was like, cool, this is from the 90s, that was sick, and it's like, yeah, okay. And that was the foundation of a lot of shit for a long time, and I think a very strong like focal point of a lot of design in my world, you know. But as things have shifted forward, 2000s, mid 2000s, it's like, okay, that was cool. it wasn't foundationally cool, like that shit that we talk about from the 90s all the time. So if we think this is cool now, by the time this gets out, will it be cool? Because it doesn't have as long as a shelf life at times. You know what I mean? And like, there's more instances of like irony now than there was previously, where it's like, it's cool in a sort of ironic way, or like, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's not a lot of that 2000s shit. And I've been pulling tons of like 2000s moto shit recently. Dude, a lot of it's bad. But you're like, oh, that's interesting.
But it's ironically sick.
Well, and I'm not even, ironically is not the best term, but you know what I mean? It's like, things are always kind of shifting, and like, especially looking at that like 2000s moto stuff, it's like, okay, well, there's always elements of it that are cool, and aside from like a period of time, it's like, how do you kind of like recontextualize those things to like make sense visually now?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I always wonder too, like, obviously people think of designers as like the names, right, that you see, but obviously there's guys like you and quantity that are out there that aren't names, that are doing stuff that people see every day.
Yeah.
Like when you're on that kind of trajectory and you got your first job, whatever, and you kind of start building your resume up, like, when do you decide or not decide that you want to kind of go your own route on things? Like, was there like a point where you were like, why don't I just have my own snowboard brand, or why, X, Y, Z, or is it always kind of like staying within the comfort of like being underneath the company?
I'm not yeah, I didn't think about that consciously at the time, because at a certain age, or maybe it's more of a timing thing, you kind of, and you guys know this, you want to be like associated with brands that are cool and like have juice, or like have energy, have momentum. So there is that, and being able to like peel out of that and do your own thing. With if you zoom out or go fast forward 15 years, you're gonna be like, should have done my own thing. But it's like, it's hard to think about those things. Doing your own thing is hard. You know this.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. I think now kids are really shifted towards just doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And I think that it's interesting to see. It's really good however many of them kind of stick with it. But it's like, you can, in high school now, you can make money off of your phone from your room. And like, when I was in high school, you had to have a shitty job. Maybe you didn't need to work, not because you're rich, but not everyone needs to work in fucking high school. Or you sold weed. Those are kind of three trajectories. So the fact that you can like sit in your room and like sell a fucking Supreme sweatshirt or whatever the fuck, and like make some, like, I think that kids now are gonna be like, they're kind of maybe setting themselves up to like, I'm gonna work for myself. Why would I need to go do this for other people? And that, it might fail 7 times before they figure out what they're doing. But I do think that there's like a momentum of like, people doing their own thing, which is cool.
Everything's cool. So much more accessible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's gotta be also probably be pretty tough. Like when you're going back to the cool phase, like, hey, it's cool when we talk about this, but when we deliver it, like, is it still cool? And then whoever, I mean, I don't know that world if you're competing with, I mean, you're obviously competing for eyeballs and that, but like, just dropping things and like, oh, you did this, and then this thing comes out, and it kind of takes, and then, with social media and having so many just bombarded with ads and, building that kind of culture, I think it's interesting that you say, it's like that cool factor and how to keep it cool and keep, dropping cool shit. Like,
I think it's got to be exhausting. Honestly. I don't know how.
Like you do the one, and you're like, dude, that was sick, and then they're like, what's next?
Yeah,
it's always what's next, right?
Yeah, totally. But with everything, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's true.
You guys are.
Yeah.
What's next season?
Yeah.
What
I think the biggest thing is it's like I would, and obviously you can speak on it, but I would think that it's got to be like what we do is self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
Right. It's like how we do directly correlates with if we have a job or not.
Yeah.
You know, so like you have to literally keep going, which is probably the same in your field. Whereas if you keep coming out with shitty stuff and it doesn't sell, eventually you're not gonna have a job. But it's not like you make something and it's not like a direct self fulfillment to it, where it's like, you know, it doesn't have your name on it, so it's not going out on the shelf and like, this is Dan Connor's jacket.
sure.
If people don't like it, then it's like directly to you. It's like, you know, whatever that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that myself and a lot of people are invested enough personally, even if it's not our shit, because I have always worked for places that I did care about. You know, growing up in Oregon, like Nike's a fucking big deal, not because of all the reasons for everybody else, but it's like this like Oregon company. Seeing that come out of like where I'm from is huge, and so working there was like a really kind of big deal, you know. And I think that it's kind of like, sorry, how did you frame that up again?
Like the main thing, I guess, just being like how to keep motivated in terms of like just the constant next.
Yeah.
And I know you guys are, I mean, how far out do you guys plan?
We're not that far out because we're not a wholesale business. So it's like we sell our shit and that's it, you know. So
you
we
guys are
have
like
something completely different. A lot of people have gone back that way, but it's like Supreme's a different thing compared to everybody else. But working at a Nike and stuff like that, it's like that's pretty far out, and you got to deal with like, well, Foot Locker doesn't like this color, so change it. You know what I mean? It's a different kind of, you have to deal with different design obstacles all the time. And like,
That's wild.
Yeah,
That they have that much leverage.
for sure.
How far out would you say? I think a lot of people, I don't even actually really know. I have a rough
it a
idea,
year?
but how far ahead, like you guys versus just say like Nike?
I mean, I don't, I think Nike's probably 2 years out.
What?
Yeah.
So like today they're working on stuff for 2027.
Yeah.
How do you like know that trend?
For a Nike, it's like, it's a broader stroke. You know what I mean? I think that those kind of places they're facing new realities in the world now. If you walk through Soho right now, it's like you almost see everything but Nike and Adidas. And I mean, that's a rash generalization because you see just as much of it as others. But now you see people wearing other shit, like other running brands on. You see people wearing Asics, Saucony, all this shit, whereas like previously you didn't see it like that. So Solomon, like that's like a newer thing where it kind of looks like people are just want different shit.
Yeah.
And so they have like a different hurdles to kind of like design into, where it's these much bigger product campaign. You know, everything's bigger, and like they have to have meetings and be like, oh, this is what we're doing for this time and the future. And then they'll meet on it internally endlessly until they've all convinced themselves it's the right thing. And then does it work? Who knows? You know? Like,
Yeah, if they get it, they latch.
Yeah.
Things.
So where you guys are more like 6 months or something like that. if that.
We're further out than that, but it's like it's not like the big companies. We can kind of, you know, everybody else comes out with a season and they're like, here you go, you can go buy it. And then we're like, it's just, here's what we're making for the season, but it comes out and that whole part of it is not this thought out thing. It's just when it was small, things went out. As they became available, as they were produced, it goes out. You know what I mean? So that was an effect of how production was run. Yeah. You know, I think that it's different for the other brands just because they have like all these different hurdles and like different ways of doing shit. Yeah.
How have you like been burnt out? I assume at some points in your career, like have you had like struggled through that where you've been like, I don't have anything coming to mind right now, like writer's block, I guess, or creator's block?
Sometimes, but usually it's like I think usually it's like it's maybe self-imposed to the point where it's like, you know, sometimes you'll work on something like it's kind of pressing. You'll work on something late and you like do all this work and then you look at it in the morning and you're like, oh, that's a bunch of shit, you know. And sometimes I think it's like how you are kind of dealing with the shit. But really, I rarely have I been like, I don't know what to do, you know? And I think that comes down to the process that you use to kind of like get stuff going. And if you kind of have like a pretty concrete process that works for you, you're able to be like, okay, I'm going through these steps that I always kind of go through, and it's not really working. What's not working? How do I get past it? And it usually works pretty well. You know? Yeah.
Like I said, I think even doing my little stuff, like it's like I get through making like one set of like 4 items. I'm like,
yeah,
I can't believe people have to do this. Like
graphics is hard though. Graphics is really hard too, because it's like, it's this fun, you know, a lot of the stuff that you're doing is like the graphics are fundamental, and you know, I'm not really a graphic designer per se. Like I do a lot of graphic stuff, but it can be tricky because it's this whole illustration or thing, and then that's what lives on the piece, you know. It's a little bit easier if you're more on like silhouette, like apparel design, where it's like, yeah, there's just more to it to kind of like process wise kind of like work through and like get to a good spot with.
What's up, dude? Welcome back. This guy's been knocked.
He's got a mid-pod check-in going on right now.
Well, it's perfect. Right at
perfect timing for our Yuasa battery segment here. Yuasa battery is the industry leader in power sports batteries. They supply batteries to more OEMs and riders than all other battery brands combined in the US and globally. What do you do to recharge your batteries after you get through, like, you know, you guys really don't have deadlines where it's like, I've got to get all this shit done by this time? It's like, it's kind of...
We do. But, I mean, honestly, I leave the city to go ride motorcycles to recharge my batteries. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that has been like that, you know, in the last, quite a while. It's like that, especially being in New York City. You guys have all spent, you're from here, Corey, but it's like that place is crazy, and like for a while you can deal with it all the time, and then sometimes it's like, get me the fuck out of here. Or like ever since I've been there, it's like a couple days a month you're like, what am I doing here? Like this is insane. So I think that like it's like a lot of things, you just got to find a balance to where it helps if you have hobbies and shit like that, where you're like, okay, I can dive into this other thing that completely physically and mentally takes me away from what I'm doing. And I think as you go older too, you maybe if it's not a hobby like riding motorcycles or something like that, it's like a little like change in cadence where it's like, okay, this is my thing. I'm gonna do this, and like I think maybe having things outside of your routine that kind of like reset you, you know? Yeah.
I saw you riding. You just got this new KTM, and what's your favorite bike to go out and clear your head? Is it riding on off road, or is it any sort of two wheels?
Maybe dirt bikes, because it is that closest thing to like skate shit, where it's like you go out the front door, you hop on a dirt bike, and like from here, you know,
Sick.
that's really fun, you know, like not, yeah, that's really fun. And I haven't. I want to get a motorcycle license so I can do what we were talking about earlier and like go ride a bike, you know, like we've talked about it before, but I like want to bug Mark and be like, yo, can I go ride a GS or something, you know, like just fucking like go do
sick.
that. Like I've never done that. That seems like it'd be fun, and it's gorgeous up here.
No, I really want to do it too. My grandfather goes every year down to Tail of the Dragon. Like, I know he's getting up there. I want to do it.
That Patagonia shit that Richie did looked
that
like,
was
dude, that looks
that's a
so
different level.
sick.
That's some Ducati shit.
No, so I think Simone did it on some not Ducati shit.
Yeah, all the experience
or
budget level,
the
budget level. Yeah. Well, that's our Yuasa batteries, recharge the batteries tip. We appreciate it. We appreciate Yuasa batteries for supporting the podcast. You can go to yuasabatteries.com and find out the battery that fits your motorcycle or your local Yuasa battery retailer. I think most motorcycle dealers in the world carry Yuasa batteries, and if they don't, well, they should be. Nonetheless, yeah, thanks for that one. And I think that's great advice. I mean, I think James and I, like, that's something, even though this is motorcycle related, like doing the podcast has kind of been that, because it's
For
like,
sure. Yeah.
it's
yeah.
like a totally,
cycling. I mean, yeah.
cycling for him for sure.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
like a whole
totally.
fucking
Yeah.
Lance Armstrong over here. But
Dude, I live for it
Dude,
though. Like,
wattage.
yeah,
I just,
yeah,
dude,
all
I,
about the watch.
Yeah.
but it's true though. Like, I live for like the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday rides. Like, where
Yep.
that you go out and just, like, you get so deep into it that you can't think about anything but breathing.
For sure.
like just not
and it's
dying.
because I mean I've always been really into cycling and stuff too, and Portland's like a big cycling place where it's like, you know, watching the like advent of cyclocross and all that stuff pop up there was crazy. But yeah, being on a bike and riding around for fitness, sure, but like also just there's that adventure aspect of it where you're just like, especially riding around New York City, it's like you can go see crazy shit on a bicycle there, and it's super fun. It very quickly gets old if you're trying to like be full roadie guy and like do shit. But exploring that place on a bicycle is fucking amazing, man.
Yeah,
So
I think seeing anything, mountain biking,
Yeah,
especially,
yeah,
like if he
yeah.
goes like
Yeah.
traveling the U.S. and with a mountain bike is.
Dude, I think it's sick. Like, and I've gotten into the gravel game a bit.
Yeah,
and just
yeah, I
being
got a
able
gravel
to
bike. I love
taking
it.
that like road bike vibe into, you know, having that little bit more mountain bike community vibe where
sure.
you can go out and
well,
have
up here too, because like I was pretty anti gravel for a long time because of the like Portland cyclocross vibe. You know, it just to me it seems like cyclocross 2.0.
Yeah.
But up here, getting a gravel bike and then like literally getting on like exploration mode and like finding trails and like was sick. You know, super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got my e-bike over there.
Yeah,
Dude.
Yeah.
Both my e-bikes.
Anti-wattage.
Sea Dog needs it, man. His back is smoked.
Oh man.
So I think where we're at, you're still in Portland. You're riding. You're having a good time.
Yeah.
When was the big move to?
You went to Nike first while you were in Portland, right?
Yeah. I went to Nike after I was at Bonfire for 4 or 5 years, I think.
Which is a
What's
snow brand.
Bonfire?
Snowboard outerwear brand. Yeah, at the time it was owned by Adidas and this bigger company that owns like Arc'teryx and shit. Almer Sports, I think. Anyway, yeah, I was there for quite a while, but I got really burnt out on like snowboard shit because I loved it growing up, but at that time, that mid 2000s vibe, it got really not that cool. And I think anything that's like resorty is like it's like a cultural vacuum. You know what I mean? Like I'm at the mountain. It's, you know what I mean? It's like, that and just like the kind of style of snowboarding was not cool at all at that time too. It just anyway. And I was friends with the guys at Nike for a long time, at Nike SB specifically, and I wanted to go work over there. And there was a break where I was kind of just chilling for a while. I did like a little bit of freelance stuff, but was also just, you know, doing whatever the fuck for a while. But then started working out at Nike for a while. And yeah, that was again just an amazing time in Portland where we had an indoor skate park. We could go skate whenever we wanted. We just had a good crew, good vibe. And at that time then too, like Nike put no pressure on that aspect of it was like small potatoes compared to the rest of the business. So it's like, do whatever the fuck you guys want, you know?
That's cool. Was that when they had the motocross boot? When were they?
Yeah.
Were you working on that at all?
No. But I was around that shit, which was
cool.
really interesting. Yeah, there was a guy that was a creative director out there for a while who was really into like BMX and like moto and shit. And that was this, you know, that was like action sport explosion days where companies like Nike were coming in. They're like surfing, moto, you know, they're like, we're going to do everything.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I think that there was a pretty, it was an interesting time. It wasn't just them. It was a lot of people just trying to get involved with everything, which really, all those things before that time were still pretty small niche things. And that kind of money filtering into those things really kind of skews things, you know? I know it did in surf. I know it like moto. It didn't really have that much of an effect, right?
Never really got into it.
No, it was
No,
just, it was
and
just
I don't
more of a
think
cool thing.
Did they ever sell them? I don't even
No,
know.
No.
they did. They canned it. I mean, it
was
the
Stewart,
the
right?
Gypsy Tale podcast. They talked about because Dungy was doing it too.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he said they were the best boots he's ever worn. Like the stuff they were doing was just unbelievable.
But he said there was like you can only wear them one moto, right?
Yeah,
Probably,
the way they
yeah.
were doing them was like so.
When they're made one off like that, it's like, yeah, I'm sure the quality was not amazing if they're
Yeah.
made. Like,
Well, and even just like the things he was asking for that they were giving him, like flexibility wise and just stuff like that, just wasn't working. But either way, yeah, they spent, I don't know, too much money on it and
yeah,
realized somebody did a market analysis or something
Yeah,
and realized
yeah.
what was going on.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
But it was a bummer. That was like, I mean, fuck, what year was that? Must have been like 09, 07, 08, 09, somewhere
I
around
think,
there.
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
It was cool.
2000s.
I was just praying it would get into road racing.
I was like, yeah. Well, and it's
Shit.
kind of crazy though. Like you think now, like moto, how much it's exploded, right?
Yeah.
Like if the timing was different, would it have latched on? Now with like A-Star going so custom with everything, now if they were to come in, they already know, but if they, this was the first time they jumped in with the custom stuff, would it just explode with, the whole, everybody does custom now.
Yeah.
Like before it was just production, white, whatever, black and whatever they made. Now it's like every color under the sun, they're coming out every month with something different, an LE and LE.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting.
Yeah.
But I think that was such a cool time.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. Of course, it didn't last because it was like too crazy, and like those brands, skateboarding obviously lasted and like went the distance for sure. But like all like them trying to do all these things, like it doesn't usually work out.
Well, even Nike SB in itself, I think, has gotten quite a bit smaller than it was at one point, right?
Internally, yeah, I have no idea. Like sales wise, I
Yeah.
think they sell a lot of shoes still, but I think that the number of people working on it internally is definitely smaller, or at least it's. Yeah, I actually don't know. I don't know.
So when did you decide to like get on the track? Like, was that like recently or?
Yeah, that wasn't that long ago. To be
Okay,
honest.
so
Yeah,
you just have been in the motorcycle culture,
Right.
When did you start to?
So at that Nike time, I was like, I think, I had that monster the whole time, and then that bike's cool, but but then you're like, what's up with this thing, So I was back at Motocorsa, and I was like, what's up with this 848, And they're like, I'm like, this has got to be in my head. A bike with fairings like that, it's like that'll kill you, Like
Yeah.
it'll be so frightening.
Yeah.
And then they're like, ride it. And I rode it, and I was like, "Oh, this is fucking chill. This is manageable." It was still crazy to me, but it was manageable. But that was my first step into being like, "Oh, okay, I'll get something a little bit different," So I got an 848 that time I was working at Nike, and then it was still like the same kind of like level of. It was still just like a thing in my life to like cruise around. I liked it. I would go on trips, but I didn't go like crazy on it, which in hindsight, I'm bummed because, we've talked about this, but the effort it takes to ride here is high. In Portland, there's a track in the city, which is really rare in a metropolitan area, these days. And like, I could have been doing it then, which probably would have like, I don't know what that would have done, but it would have been fun, Like, I don't know if that would have, I don't know what that would have meant, but it would have been fun to like be doing that. And also I wasn't riding dirt bikes then, which is crazy because that part of Oregon, or not so much Portland, but outside of Portland is amazing.
There's
and
tons.
like all over.
There's tons.
Yeah, totally. And like Washougal's right there, like all that shit.
Yeah.
Like,
And were you into that stuff? Did you ever go?
I mean,
to
I
Washougal?
mean, no, because I was still, my whole life was like skateboarding and
Yeah.
like that world,
Right.
basically, that was it.
And so, but because there's like CC and there's all those motorcycle.
That was pre all that.
Yeah.
Pre all that.
But
I don't know.
that
when they all
dude
started.
Tor was like in the mix then. He
okay.
just hadn't started doing that yet. Yeah.
So you go to Boston, you bring in bikes, or you?
Yeah. So I leave I had to kind of just leave Portland just because it's a small place, and I left to go to because Nike owns Converse. I left to go to Converse to work in their skate program, and I sold the Monster before I left. I took the A48 with me, and then I was like riding it to work a little bit, but not much, and then I crashed it riding to work one day just because driving in Boston is insane. And our office was like north of the city. Yeah, and I bought a car. I got my first car for a really long time when I moved out there. I bought a Ford Transit, like the small ones. And 2 weeks of driving that thing around Boston, I was like, I got one of those like those extendo like stick weapons because I was like this is gonna get crazy because I hadn't driven for a long time.
Some guy
and
from
like
Harvard Yard.
that world there was like insane. And I was riding my bike to work one day and this is classic shit out there. The fast lane will seize up for no reason while everything else is just like flowing naturally. And this car in front of me just like locked it up, and I did the same thing, but the front just dove, and then yeah. But and then after that, I kind of got it fixed, and I fucking sold it.
You're like,
and I was
scared
off.
you or
No, it wasn't that. I just didn't have anyone there.
Yeah.
At the time, I was in Boston. I was in New York every week. I was seeing someone in the city, and I never really wanted to be in Boston in general because I wanted to be in New York, but this thing was like a cool new job, and then with people I knew, which was cool, but I just wanted to be in New York. So I was in New York 3 days a week, and that was kind of my priority then, and I kind of like didn't have anyone up there to like be riding with and stuff, which also in hindsight, I wish I would have, because there is that whole New England shit, which is wild,
yeah.
but I would have liked to have kind of seen that kind of up close.
yeah.
That's where I'm from.
Yeah, totally.
New England.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, doctor.
I mean, dude, Boston's wild.
Dude. Yeah.
Did you go to Boston much?
No, not really.
Never been to Harvard Yard.
No, I went to Fenway Park.
Yeah, it's a wild place.
Yeah.
Man.
Do you think that it was hard to, because it sounds like you went from like snowboard company was smaller, Nike's obviously corporate, Converse corporate. Was it hard to go from that transition of being like a bad boy to going corporate? Or were they like pretty flexible?
Not at Nike, because they didn't really care. You know, this was a little auxiliary program. It kind of felt like that. It was its own thing, and I was a contracted in-house designer there. So I didn't really work for Nike, or I wasn't like a what's it called, like headcount job,
like an employee,
subcontractor.
Yeah, which was interesting at that time because it was like I was getting checks with no taxes withheld, and like I was going on trips around the world and like billing them hourly. It was wild.
Yeah,
it was great. Yeah,
that's really cool.
So like there was no like, oh shit, this like big hierarchy situation there. Really, I mean there was a hierarchy, but in this little in this little world,
Did you find it ever hard to? I feel this way with like motorcycle stuff and kind of being into, we talk about a lot, but just like not even the fashion, but the design side of it and just like the culture side of it. Did you find it hard to see what your kind of like passion, or people say like my culture, see your culture kind of become like mainstream, and like not like obviously gatekeep it, but like kind of like struggle with that, where you see people all of a sudden that are like, well, you don't really skate, but you're wearing this skate brand. Like obviously that's what you want us to do because then you're selling more stuff from that perspective, right? But is that like a hard thing to kind of always?
I think previous to that era, it was trickier, but then not so much, because that was already, I think when Nikes and other people came into these worlds, that was like, it was just a new thing, and it's like there's big trade-offs to it, but you talk to the kids that are getting paid to wear Nikes, it's worth it. You know what I mean? But it was something that had been happening. It took Nike tried to do skateboarding. That was the third time. SB was the third time that they tried it. So they did 2 other times before that. Didn't go well, but it was because they didn't. The guy that started SB was a certain guy that was able to really like kind of like make it work. And then previously it was kind of a little bit more like seat of the pants, like, and it didn't really work. But I think that stuff had been bubbling up through the 2000s, where it's like, you know, different to how it is now, where it's like what I was saying earlier about popular culture, less subculture. It was still more subcultural then, but it was like starting to, you know, the X Games shit, all that. Like that was like a turning point for all of these things, where it's like everybody's seeing that shit, and then there's like money realities to it. There's big trade-offs as far as like some of it, but at that point, no one's like, these guys are kooks because whatever. You know, it's already like, okay, cool.
Yeah, you sell out or not.
Yeah,
like,
but it's like
you got to. If you don't go, you don't.
For sure, you can be upset about it, or you can like,
Do you see that happening before it happens though? In your guys' like position?
I think yes, but further like before that, quite a ways. Yeah.
So do you see that like with obviously motorcycle stuff has become very fashionable like of the last, I don't know, what do you say, like 8-10 years?
Yeah.
You see like Balenciaga doing their biker shit and all that stuff. Is that like something you guys see or predicted going that direction?
No, but I think that if you look at there's been evidence of that's happened a lot of other times. You know what I mean?
Polo, Ralph Lauren always did that kind of stuff, but it was
for
more
sure.
like in a tasteful way. I feel like not so much of like I don't know how to explain it, but
I know what you mean. I think that what's different about moto now in all of these spaces is that it stayed there, because like you see it pop up in the Balenciaga shit or whatever, and you're like, all right, I don't know if they're gonna keep referencing this shit, or you know what I mean. But it's been there for a minute now. You know, it's kind of like staying the course, and I think it goes back to what I'm saying, where it's like all of this shit is just like part of this big thing now, and it's like all of the subcultural shit is part of popular culture now, and it's like it's part of aesthetics, it's part of conversations, it's part of all this stuff, and motorsports is definitely there. You know, it's cool. It's cool. It's fundamentally cool shit. You know, so it's like that stuff's gonna be there.
I feel like it's been like way behind.
Everything's behind it. Yeah, motorcycles for sure.
Like I feel like it's taken a long time for people to even allow it. Like seeing all these partnerships with Alpine Star and all these little collabs that are happening, and I feel like.
Well, I mean, Puma and Ducati, like there's always been those things. Like Puma did a lot of Formula One shit, I think, back at that time too. There's always been that Diesel, like Diesel and Ducati did shit. Like there's always these like other examples of it. But the Diesel thing is like, oh, they're Italian. It's like an Italian shit. There's different versions of the shit that we're seeing now. And I think in previous contexts, those times, there was just like, it was like a different public to kind of like put that out to.
I think that as well as there's riders now that are like, I think everything's becoming more, I don't know if it's desensitized, I don't know what the right word is for that, but more riders are being okay. They're okay with going that direction with, say, their design work or their ID, what they normally wear, like what you would normally see in moto of everybody wearing a team shirt, this, that, and the other, and now you're seeing like guys like fully decked out like they're F1,
right?
Different kind of style, but like you're seeing more guys show up to the racetrack and then putting a team shirt on. Right. They're not showing up to the track in a team shirt. They're like wearing whatever they're wearing, but it's like it's totally made a big shift. To where it was just like very. Very straight and narrow. Everything was so straight and narrow. You're seeing it in GP, with Bez and those guys, the VR46 guys, like they're wearing big clothes and just they're.
I think it goes through waves, though. I think that there has been that, and you guys would probably know more than me, but it's like there has been times where you've seen that, but I think it's a bigger picture thing that is like more evident now. But yeah, no, I think to me it looks like there's a little bit more personality coming through, where it was very like suppressive due to sponsorship and due to I think there's a direct correlation to when the athleticism and sanity really sunk its teeth into motorsports and a lot of sports, right? Where it's like you are going to commit every ounce of yourself into becoming the best you possibly can be, which I think kind of like stifles, I'm going to be zany and party and wear whatever the fuck I want.
You lose your identity.
So you get locked into a lifestyle that is like, okay, this is me. And it looks robotic, and it's evidence of what you're committing. You know what I mean? Or there's less time for like personal attributes or like vibe shit to like come to the surface if you don't give yourself that time, because you're just fucking locked in. So
I mean, I think like Jason Anderson's like a good example of that in Supercross. Like you hear him talk about on his podcast about like doing his Hollywood Hills, house and all that. Being
totally.
a bad boy or whatever. But I think social media is a lot of it too. I think people don't realize or put enough emphasis on that, because it's like, even if you're doing sick shit in like the early 2000s, like McGrath had like pretty cool style back then. I saw a picture, forget where it was, but it was Bubba, and like he had those crazy Oakleys on, like the metal ones that were like, Matrix looking style.
Totally.
And like some like baggy, like you just had like a sick fit going on.
Yeah.
But back then where would you see that? Like the only reason there's any record of it is some like old
magazine.
Photographer pulled it out of a print file he had somewhere back then. But otherwise, it's not like you're scrolling back to his Instagram and seeing the sick outfit he wore at Bud's Creek in 2003.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of like documentation of stuff now is just like
crazy.
Insane.
Yeah. I just think like when I look back at my, like, I mean, I'm whatever, but I would never, there's so many things like, like I feel like I never showed really my personality. Like growing, I mean...
Dude, you showed up to fucking Fontana with bleach blonde hair.
Yeah, but like I was still in team, I don't know. I just feel like it's more just now, it's like more out there.
Yeah, no,
like it's just people like, I think are just real.
Well, I think people want you to be different too. That's the difference.
Authentic.
Also, is like you were saying, like everything has become, it's like so overwhelmingly quick and everything's like in your face. So it's like if you're not different, you're the same.
Right.
If you're not finding something new that's different.
Well, it's more in the individual's ballpark now, right? It's up to them to decide, like, hey, do I want to show more of this in a way, And it's up to them, Like they can run their own shit. Maybe they don't, but like, they can kind of like put it out there, or like focus on certain shit to put out there. I guess,
So going into from Boston, obviously you're at Converse and did you go straight from Converse to Supreme?
Yeah.
You've been there, what, 12 years?
No, almost 10 years. Yeah, just short of 10 years, yeah.
And then, but bikes-wise, you kind of really got more serious into it.
Yeah, I actually stopped riding in Boston after I crashed that bike, and then left Converse to move to New York to work at Supreme. And, like, I think very quickly... I sat right next to Ryan, my good friend who was there sitting next to me. I walked by his screen one day, and he had like a picture of a yellow 748 on his screen. I was like, oh shit. I was like, that's a cool bike. And he's like, yeah, that's my bike. And I was like, oh, damn. And I was like showing him photos of my bike. And I was like, that's great. I mean, like, basically, he's the reason that I started riding bikes again. So sitting next to him when I first started working at Supreme, we just started chopping it up about that stuff. Him and his boys were all into bikes and stuff. And I just got like, I started thinking about getting a bike. I didn't do it right away, but then it started to happen.
Snowballed.
Dude, it's a seed, man. It's a bad one.
Yeah. So basically, like, me and my boys were out in the Poconos, kind of doing this annual like get together out in the woods. And my buddy who lived up here in Beacon at the time was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting a dirt bike." And I was like, "If I can keep a dirt bike at your crib, I'll go get one this week." And so we both bought dirt bikes, and I put it at his place, and then that was it basically. Yeah. So
Hooked.
yeah, after that, we started riding bikes again, and then dirt bikes. Very quickly bought a 959, and then met Kevin, and he's like, "You got to ride this thing at the track." I think I rode the 959 like twice on the road.
Oh, no way.
And then I went to the track, and then it was like curtains. Yeah.
So what time frame is your
This
first track
would-
day?
2018, I think.
2018.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So fairly recent.
Yeah, totally.
What track?
Safety track.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's early on. That's gonna be early on safety track, no?
No, they were
Nah.
in 2012.
Yeah.
2012.
Yeah.
They opened up.
Corey was there opening day.
I know.
Pretty much, dude. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you can have the same connection with, or obtain the same connection with people out of anything else like you can with motorcycles? Like that relationship, you guys like just hit it off like that, just over having a background of a bike. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's something about motorcycles that is different than a lot of other things. Where because there's few, maybe it's because there's so few people who also know that feeling.
Yeah.
Or like can share that relativity with.
Yeah.
Because it's just not, you don't walk around every day and see somebody who rides a bike.
For sure. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, what you brought up, James, too, where it's like in America, especially too, because we have a different, it's a hobby kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So it's different if you fucking scooted your whole life in Italy or something. You know what I mean? You got a scooter when you're 12 or whatever. It's different in these other places. But for us at that time, kind of, you know, it is kind of that skate vibe too, because when I was younger and skating, if you went to another town and you saw someone holding a skateboard, you went and talked to them. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was like that. So it's similar in that sense, but also because of being in New York, because of doing design shit, it also quickly, when I started going to the track and shit like that, it became this great escape to get away from like cool guy shit in the city, to be like, oh, I'm just like, yeah, I'm talking to these strangers.
Yeah, Kevin Hoffman who hangs windows.
Yeah, I'm hanging out with Kevin Hoffman and ripping laps at the track, and like, it's such a great break from the city that it's like, yeah, in that context, it was like amazing, you know, and I think pretty different in terms of riding a motorcycle is not like. It's not like a lot of other shit. It's crazy. It can be crazy. It can be, it's a very visceral experience, you know, that I think kind of resonates on a lot of different levels, you know?
I think the other thing too, that's like interesting is, like we were just saying, like if you go to a skate park, you kind of know generally the box of people you're going to get. Right, as a kid growing up, it's similar, very similar interests.
Until not that long ago, skateboarding was like 3 buckets of people.
Right. Yeah. Where motorcycle riding, unless you're, I mean, even Harley guys, I mean, you go to Sturgis and like 90% of the guys are lawyers. You know, it's like, it's not like it's got such a, I don't know, it's like such a unique, not like melting pot, but in the sense of like there's so many people that are from here, and here that all, you know, have that same thing that can be so totally different outside of just that one common ground, where I think a lot of other things, you know, I guess maybe sports, but I'm not a sports guy, so I don't know, but
no, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Now getting into, which is like long story short, because people probably like, how does this all come together? How did you get into the actual design side of that? Like obviously you said yourself, like it was nice to get away from design with motorcycle stuff. Right, it's like it's kind of an outlet to not think about
New York,
that.
Kind of New York City. You know, it was a good break to get outside of that. Which, I just think that I'm kind of spanning a lot of time here with that comment, but because I love New York and I spent so much time. That's all I was doing was there, and it was like all I wanted to do was be there. And then that kind of like shifted a little bit with the advent of like starting to ride bikes and shit again too, where it was like, at first just exploring this area on dirt bikes, like was huge, you know, me and my buddy, and just kind of checking shit out. And then, you know, a couple of the dudes from the shop that are also into dirt bikes, like, oh, hey, let's go ride, and like kind of like patching all that together, because there's motorcycles in New York City is a very interesting thing. You know, there's kids on dirt bikes, like ripping around, not even just like crazy like fucking bad boy shit, but just like, you know, you can ride like a dirt bike around New York City, like not much is gonna happen, you know. So there's that, but then there's also like you know, it's a big place coming from the West Coast and seeing like the East Coast version of kind of like biker crews and stuff like that was very different, because especially the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest is like very like outlaw biker centric. There's a lot of that shit that you see there. And then like, you know, living in the East Village, the HA had the spot for a while, which since closed down. But then you see the kind of more kind of like regional, not outlaw like biker shit, which is pretty interesting to see in that landscape. And then you just have like, you know, the dudes that like wear suits and shit and like ride their, you know, they do that whole thing.
Yeah,
There's
clubs,
that.
Yeah. Long Island Expressway racers. And
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But the like big ride that they do every year where they like dress up and shit.
oh, the gentleman ride.
Yeah, there's that shit. But you know, there's shit where people just want to like ride around a motorcycle around New York City, and it's all cool, you know. But yeah, for me, it was cool, like getting out of the city and kind of like exploring new shit, but then also exploring that other stuff too.
And why bikes? Like, why was it bikes that took you? Like, why did motorcycles, or like, you know, how come it wasn't something else that could, you know, you get out of the city and do something else? But like,
why is this rabbit hole the deepest one that you're down?
No, I'm just trying to understand, because like people.
How could I find a more economically poor thing to get into?
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of people on the other side of this that, you know, ride bikes, and I think that there's a lot of people that don't ride bikes that listen to this pod, that maybe could, you know, align that they work in a city and do like, why is it bikes? Is there something about it, a feeling, or is there?
I mean, it's because it's already like been part of my life in other times, you know, and then it was this time to like really uncork it like in a different way, where it's like getting into the dirt bike shit, and then starting to ride on the track, where it was like, oh shit, this is fucking cool. And you know how when you first start to ride at the track, it's like you're like working towards something and like making these gains, and it feels really engaging in that way. Do
you feel on the edge at the track day? Like, do you feel like you like, do you ever feel like you like get that?
No, not well on the I would say at the go-kart track on a supermoto, I feel like I'm on the edge, where it's like the front moves fucking 8 inches, but you don't crash, and you're like, damn, and you keep going. Or like the next time you do crash,
and that feeling.
And then, you know, when I have crashed on a big bike, it's not, oh, I'm fucking pushing it to the ragged edge. It's like, I made a mistake and I fucking crashed. You know what I mean? Yeah. I feel like that's why the supermoto go-kart thing, I think for like regs civilian, is the closest you get to like really kind of pushing it and feeling where things like you're kind of losing it, but you don't, you know?
It's like, I think the reason I bring that up is because I have like 2 buckets that I like ride in, absolutely on the fucking limit.
Yeah.
And like, that's the feeling that I like to feel, and that's what I live for.
Right.
Like, that's the addiction for me to continue to race a motorcycle, is like the races, whether I've won or lost, being on the limit with somebody else to the end is like a feeling I wish every person in their life could feel.
Right. Yeah.
And then there's, dude, riding 5th gear at 30 mile an hour, like just super cruise, chill. There's like nothing for me in between.
Right.
Really. And so that's why I'm like trying to ask like the feeling of a motor, like why motorcycle is just to try to understand, because I know myself and my buckets, and just you know, like why do people ride?
For
you know?
sure. And I think that it was like, yeah, trying to push yourself to kind of improve in two different ways, on the dirt bike. And then, you know, one of the guys I was riding with all the time was like, used to be a professional skateboarder. And I would watch his relationship with it personally, where I'm like, yeah, he's like that with everything he does. You know what I mean? Where it was different for me because it was like, yeah, I'm trying to like get better at this and kind of wrap my head around it. But it was also just like really fucking fun.
Yeah.
It was me and him talked about it often, where it felt like we started skating, you know, where it's like, holy shit, low effort, crash as much as I mean, you can really fuck yourself up on a dirt bike too, but it's like, lay it down all the time, doesn't matter.
Yep.
Like, you know, it was like fun to like go through mud and shit at that point for us, you know, it was like real kid shit. And then you get to the point where you're like, I'm not fucking going through that put, you know, like you very quickly are like, you know, so I think it was that. And then on the bigger bike, riding at the track, because even though I had, that A48 or whatever, I was just riding that around the street. And sure, I kind of went fast on it a few times, but not really. Like, I was always pretty like reserved on that thing. Like, we would go on fun rides and kind of like punch it up a little bit, but I was also like more scared of my surroundings than myself on it. And like that always was kind of in my head. I had a lot of injuries as a skateboarder, and like I had a lot of injuries like fucking partying and like some crazy shit where I did always kind of have that in my mind as well. But as I got back into it out here, riding on the track, it was like, wow, like going down a straightaway was like, holy shit, like this is crazy.
Like that.
And then, you know, that's cool in a sense, but like all those little things, like learning all those little things and like figuring out how to ride the bike around a track was insane.
Well, and you work on your own shit too, which is not really.
Yeah, but I didn't then. You know what I mean?
But you learned
but,
how, and it's like
because of the way I kind of do everything, I was like, you know,
Immersive.
Yeah, totally. And then it's like you want to, there was other things that went along with that. Where first I was keeping a bike at my buddy's place. Then he moved, so I got a storage up here and was like kind of keeping. It was like on 52 back towards you, like really close to you. And then it's like, oh, I got this storage, and then it was like, got that place. You know, like even when I had that storage, I had like started getting tools and all that shit. And you just have to start doing your own shit. You know, you can't be.
Well,
like,
you don't.
well, you guys know. You guys
go to Hudson Valley Motorcycles.
That's
rack your bill up as much as you possibly.
No, but you know, it gets to when you get really into something. If you're trying to go do something the next day, you got to.
You gotta be able to figure it out.
You got to figure it out,
or not go like James and I.
Or not go, or it's like if something happens while you're doing something, you got to like be able to figure that out too. But I was like very like rabbit hole and hard.
Would you say like learning a new trick in skating would there be any sort of similarities to going through a corner or like body position? Or something?
100%. Yeah, totally.
That's.
I mean, you know, it's very almost cavemanish, but yes, the first time you put your knee down, you're like, oh, that's cool. You know, like
I'm a dog.
You know, and that's cool. And then like 15 minutes later, you're like, that wasn't that cool. But you know, I mean, like all of it, every step of kind of like learning about it and actually doing it is very. It's very similar for me inside mentally, like the feeling of it is similar. Yeah.
So when did so you're starting out on the track, you're doing all that. When did like you start to see some, I don't know, similarities or see people either wearing Supreme or in motorcycling? Like, has it always kind of been there? Like, how did you start to move into more at the track, and then or even going?
I think
to some
that there's
GPs?
always been an overlap. You know, I think that if you look at New York City specifically, it's like there's always been that like cool uptown fucking Vance and jacket. Like Genesis was the shop there, right? That they would do those Vansons with, and it was like cool uptown vibe. So that's always been like part of that world. And you know, New York City spreads out to other places, and regionally there's other similar kind of vibes, you know, LA, Miami. There's always that cool fucking bike element to a zone and a culture. And so I was never really like correlating those things too directly at that time, because it was already kind of there, you know. Yeah.
When did you start seeing those, like the desire to want to actually get into the process of designing things that had to do with, obviously, your own shit you always do cool stuff with, so it's like that part of it, but
that's it, you know. I mean, and I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but it's like, as I've, even before, like, flashback a long time ago, I'm always, if I'm into something, that's the kind of stuff I'm paying attention to, you know. So I always was like up on like Vance and shit. I was always up on it's Alpine Stars and Dainese. Like those are the brands that make this stuff. And I kind of paid attention to it, but not like I did once I got back into it this time, because while Ryan and I are kind of getting back into it, he's big on like MotoGP, and so we start paying attention to MotoGP, and like, you know, it becomes a holistic rabbit hole where it's like, yes, I'm gonna do all of this, pay attention to all this stuff, and you know, I think it was gonna happen that I, like, for the shit that I'm interested in, I want to like kind of split hairs on the design element of it too. So I think, yeah, that's where it started. I started thinking about that shit.
When was your first GP that you went to?
That was later. I mean, I think 21.
Okay, so recent.
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay, so this is
yeah,
really
because
recent.
I was paying attention to it. I didn't go. Ryan and Dustin and his friends had been going for a while, and at first they go to Magello every year, and then like they go to Austin as well. And then I finally went out with them and then saw that whole shit in person. It's crazy. It was absolutely insane.
Was your first one in Europe or in America?
In Austin.
Okay.
Yeah. It was cool. Super.
And then now you've been to more than probably both James and I combined.
Well, dude, he had a rally. He had an end of season rally there, man.
Dude, you were freaking. I see every time you're just over there, I'm like, freaking damn, man. He's like,
Yeah, I went to a lot of races this year.
That's really cool.
It was super cool. Yeah, it was insane.
And so, because you have helped with a few designs and.
Yeah, I've been kind of, you know, I've been fortunate with what I do. Has, you know, it kind of has it's like what we were talking about earlier, you know, like the kids that are doing shit are very much like paying attention to all this other shit, have more of a personality, have a little bit more style, like, and it's kind of like, it's not a stretch to think that they're going to know about the stuff that I do, you know? So there was a little bit of, I think I just, fortunately with what I'm working on, there was some like opportunity to kind of start doing some of that stuff. But honestly, on purpose, I didn't want to do that off the jump. Mostly because I didn't feel comfortable in that world, really. I didn't know that many people. And I'm sure you guys could understand if someone just shows up, who gives a shit who they work for? But if they show up and start, like, that's annoying. And and I think that in a lot of situations, you kind of have to like build real relationships and kind of like spend time around shit to feel like actually comfortable coming into this other space and doing shit, you know, which I think is important in a lot of aspects outside of this too.
Yeah, no, I think in general, I think it's a good approach to have. What was the first project that you did work-wise? Because obviously people are familiar with the different Supreme. They did the Honda project.
Yeah.
That did a lot of stuff with Fox. Otherwise, was it just the Honda stuff?
It was, the Vans and stuff has always happened.
Right.
There was Fox first and then Honda. which was Honda and Fox at that time. And then we've since then done that.
But you weren't involved in that stuff.
No, I worked on that stuff.
You were?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all of it.
And then you ran a helmet at one of the races this year.
Yeah. So the Ducati project obviously is the most recent thing.
Yep. Yeah, that was last season. Yeah.
Is that one of the bigger, things
For sure.
you've worked on?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, that was a big one. Yeah.
It was sick.
Yeah, it was cool.
It was really cool.
Yeah, super cool.
And so how does that, what does that process look like in terms of, do you go to the company and say, this is something I think would be cool? Or they come to you and say, we're looking at getting, we want to do a different collab in this motorsport region. And you're like, okay, well, I can push it this way.
Basically that came up because, I think they reached out to us a very long time ago. Like when I first started working there, and it was like not interested. And then those kind of projects are usually a different category than what I work on. I mean, we're still a pretty small team, so there's a lot of overlap, and a lot of us work on a lot of different shit.
How big is the company? I think a lot of people think it's massive, but
it's not that big.
Yeah,
it's not that. I can't.
It's
even
like less than 100 people total.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's not including like stores and shit, but it's not big. And so it came up. There's a lot of shit personally that I'd love to do there all the time, but that's not how it works.
Right.
And so I didn't bring it up, but the dude that's in charge of those kind of projects was like, hey, we're thinking about doing this. I was like, cool. So, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it came up, and then we often just kind of like internally talk about shit before we ever reach out, and then we decided we were down to do it, and so we reached out. I'd already kind of was able to ring up Paulo Chabati and talk to him, and he kind of like initiated the whole thing. Yeah, yeah.
And do you think it's getting into the industry? Like, what was your impression? Obviously you've been in other industries, whether it's skate or snow, and like I've dealt with people that are bigger names or whatnot. Like, has it been more or less accessible, or kind of like what you expected to get to knowing to those people? Like, was it difficult? Like, I couldn't imagine like you could just call up Toto Wolff and be like, yo, I want to do a collab with Mercedes, and it'd be like pretty easy to get there. Like, it'd be like a long road of a chain of numerous people, and very difficult, and probably not that fun to make something happen. Has it been different? Because most
this
are
is
small.
Yeah. I mean, you mean like being able to be like, oh,
just making connections.
Yeah,
making genuine connections.
So I think what I'm very fortunate in this scenario is that along these lines of me getting back into motorcycle shit, people have, if you do certain shit, people are always hitting you up. And one person that hit me up in Italy is this guy, Federico Fantini, who's a VR46 dude. And this was when VR46 was going to be their first year. It was under Avintia Real still. It was one bike, and it was Luca on the one bike. And they were like, hey, we'd like to do something. And like a lot of scenarios, I was like, hey, you guys, personally, love this. Not going to happen, you know? Because it, in the U.S., and this is a bigger conversation, but in the U.S., it's like, kids don't know what the fuck MotoGP is, and like it wasn't something that at that time, it wasn't as simple as like, it's not Ducati saying, hey, do you want to, it's different than what we started talking about. And I was like, hey, thanks for reaching out. He seems super cool. And he did Fox Italy for a while. Was just a great dude. And we stayed in touch. I was like, let's stay in touch. And, because it's VR46, it's like, oh, hey, Pecco and Valentino love the brand. And I was like, cool. Let me send you a box of stuff. And then to then kind of have then to be talking to Pecco and meeting Valentino and shit at that first Coda race, at the first Austin race I went to, met him. And it's like, to see those dudes get excited about something that is like, I don't really think about very much, but, and to see a professional at a level to be like gassed on a sweatshirt is like, that's cool. That's super cool. But that started an open dialogue in that world, and in a cool way too, because it wasn't based on anything really, you know. It was just like kind of worlds colliding a little bit. And so because of that, I knew Paulo because he was running the team at that point. And so when we were talking about doing the Ducati project, it was like, cool, I can reach out to them. And obviously it was like they were into it. So yeah,
That's really cool.
I think it's wild.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it too is also just like you're a genuine person, like knowing you personally,
Authentic.
but like you're an enthusiast.
Yeah, no,
You know,
totally.
like there's
totally.
you're not getting any personal gain out of any of it.
Yeah, and I
know.
think that, you know, from my experiences, when you deal with some people that maybe don't kind of really understand or like live in that world, it's a lot of kind of harebrained, like, what if we did this? It's a lot of what if we did this is where you're like, all right, man, no.
Yeah.
You know, and
yeah.
that comes across really, you know, I've seen a lot of that over the years, where people are able to connect some dots, but then you're like, dude, these dots don't add up, you know. Like, it's not cool, you know. There's a lot of shit, and I think that's what you see a lot of happening these days, where it's like
Too far.
some people are connecting some dots, but it's like it's not fucking cool.
Yeah, they don't really get it. Yeah.
No, and it's evident in what's being produced, you know. So yeah, I think that if it's kind of more based in, I don't want to say reality, but if it's more based in kind of mutual understanding of what each other does, then it's like it shows, you know. Yeah.
Law Tigers is a partner of ours. 1-800-Law Tigers. You know, America's motorcycle lawyers. We talked a bit before. We usually do a tech tip, and obviously, most people we speak to on the show have been, you know, with a few exceptions, have been riding their entire lives. As somebody who's kind of really just getting into it, or has a short career, if you will, in terms of riding, what's your kind of tech tip for an average Joe kind of guy who's in, you know, more people like you than like us, you know?
I think it's kind of, in my kind of context, it's like reaching out to people like you guys and like finding, you know, it's real easy to bolt things onto a bike or like take things off of a bike, but it is like some real kind of like experiential kind of like coaching or training or something like that, which, there's that in moto world. And then also I think, you know, in kind of a design context, there's a lot now. I mean, kind of touching on what we were saying earlier, like kids are kind of more prone to do their own thing now. And I think that is great, but also like, if you kind of went down a path where you wanted to be like a skater or a professional racer or something like that, and you realize that maybe that's not going to happen, how do you, if you love that thing, how do you continue to kind of be around it and like do something else? It could be design, it could be photography or video, you know.
So just because you can't do the thing doesn't mean
and I think it's just kind of like it's figuring out what interests you about that thing, and then pivot or like, do you
just hold on to it however you can.
Yeah, totally. Or figuring out like what part of that, like, dude, there's a lot of tech tips with computers, you know? There's a lot, like what you can do now from your home with this podcast setup or a computer is insane. So I think that people there's so much at the fingertips that you can really do a lot of cool shit now.
I think you really hit home on that though. Like, just because you can't do the one thing that you wanted, you can still be in either that industry or that sport or wherever that is, and continue to do a part of what you love in that culture. And I think so many people give up. Like they go, I can't be a skater or a professional skater or a professional motorcycle racer or whatever, and they're just like, well, I don't want to be in that industry because I can't do that. Sure. And it's like, well, you know, like I think that's something that a lot of people need, maybe not need, but should pursue, and I think it's really valid what you bring up.
Yeah, and I think that there's you can kind of be at that epicenter of like cool, fun shit, even if you're not the fucking person on the box, or like, you know, like there's a lot to kind of gain from like kind of, if it's shit that you love, like being around it and like having a really good time.
I think that's something I've learned really late, you know, in my career, is like having fun.
Yeah.
Like we did this because we love it, and you know, like motorcycling.
And from a young age, so you guys like kind of like, you know, you got pulled out of some regular kind of like learning, like regular kid learning things, to where it's like you were just like racing, and you gotta like, you know, it's kind of like you gotta look back and then think about it a little bit, you know, perspective wise. Yeah.
For sure. Well, I appreciate that. We appreciate that, and hopefully you guys like that one. If you
Yeah, hopefully you guys like that one. Thanks to Law Tigers. If you know anybody that's in a motorcycle accident, please call 1-800 Law Tigers.
1-800 Law Tigers.
Boom.
Now, as far as the design stuff goes, you know, have you had like any unique projects, like teams hitting you up now, or people kind of starting to get an understanding of like what it is that you're actually into, and you're not just some guy from Supreme that's like got t-shirts, like you can actually design bikes, and like there's more,
for sure,
more interested. You're also interested in doing more.
Yeah. And part of that has been because of the being around it for a while and just kind of like building relationships, you know. And I think that there's definitely some there's definitely some really cool shit in the near future. Like I think the thing that's visible now that you can see is I have a really good friend and in this space at Dainese, Simone, who's amazing dude, and you know, we've had a lot of conversations about, and Corey, you and I have had a lot of these conversations where it's like, what could you see differently in this?
Right.
And I think that zooming out of what you just asked me, when I'm kind of like taking in this world and what I see, there is a lot that I think could be better. And I realize that's a very subjective thing to say, because it's like, does the regs motorcycle guy really care? But you know, there's things that, and this is all coming from, you know, my world and my experiences, but there's definitely things I'd like to see slightly differently, and then trying to like ascertain if that's feasible or worthwhile to spend the time to kind of affect those things. You know what I mean? And we've talked about this a lot with like shit, you know, merch, like all these things where you see stuff and you're like, doesn't seem like it's that great.
The opportunity's there, but is it worth taking?
Yeah. And it's like, do they care? Do the people whose merch it is care? Do the people buying it, do they care? But yeah, so I've been kind of like paying a lot of attention to that stuff, as I do with most things from a design context. But you know, having lots of conversations with these people, with these some of the relationships I've built around this, and the one that's kind of been bubbling up that's been super cool is working with Simone at Dainese, and it is kind of like around custom works and the suits, and you know, if you look at the guys in MotoGP and you guys too, we only really see you guys in your factory gear, which I mean, you guys have practice suits too, but what I'm getting at is like the practice suit is kind of the only place where you can really see something kind of different and unique. And you know, Simone and I had a lot of conversations in the last couple of years where it's like, you know, oftentimes when you see someone at a track day that's made a custom suit, it's like, okay, cool. They picked some bright colors and put them on these panels. And it's like, so that's not that interesting, you know? And we've been talking about, you know, what could you do differently in that context? And also, you know, when I see what these, I feel like at times they don't use these really cool kids enough in these processes, you know, where it's like you see them in the race capacity, and, you know, VR46 and Bez is a great example because it's like those dudes are just together riding bikes all the time. And it's insane. Like, you've never seen a clip of them fucking lifting weights. Like, that's part of their whole thing. They don't show that. Their whole thing is riding motorcycles.
Yeah.
And so you see that and you get this vibe that there's this like different kind of thing, which is super cool. But, you know, part of that and part of the conversation we had is like, hey, it would be really cool if you were able to take someone like Bez and then do a cool practice suit for him that people would then see, and then be able to do that in like custom works, you know, and kind of ramp things up where it's like, instead of just putting colors and panels, it's like, oh shit, here's like 4 prints that you could choose from, you know, here's ways to kind of elevate it in a way. And for those brands, they could then be like, look, this suit he wore is really cool. It doesn't really have it's not a weekend race suit. Right. So they have more leverage with those kind of things to kind of like show these kids like unique personalities and style, and then kind of like be able to make that something that's on the table for other people to kind of like have or do something similar to, you know, which has been super cool.
I think like, dude, my favorite time of the year is the Tuesday or the test after GP and seeing whoever does it. And I mean, Rossi was like, I don't want to say one of the originators, but he was definitely the guy to push the limits on bright colors and do some, you know, like actually take some style and like, you know, have some sort of
style wise. Air Max 95s on a scooter, wheelie, Stone Island jacket. Like, dude, all of that is like amazing. And kind of like, you know, the main reference point, I think, you know, for all of that stuff. And some of it has to do with just like young Italian culture, but also he was just amazing. But yes, seeing the test shit is amazing because a lot of them contractually can't run certain shit, and you get to see the whole like one-off vibe, which is super cool.
Did you like the new all red Mark suit or stuff?
I thought it was cool.
It's interesting.
I thought it was cool. I thought it was an interesting vibe. I thought that
I love how they're doing like all the full bike too. Like it matches.
For sure.
It's not just a suit.
You know, at Grassini, it felt a little bit different because he's the dude coming. It's like a different scenario where he's coming out of this long Honda thing, coming onto this satellite bike. He had a bike and he had a whole kit that was different. In the Ducati box, it felt different, but contractually he can't have the existing livery, you know. So I thought it was sick. Like the brightness of it was insane, and like that's really leaning into like going to Ducati, you know. But also the white and silver factory scheme was super cool too, you know. Sick. But it did feel, you brought it up, it did feel different. Like it did split the box a little bit in a way. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, oh, Mark can do whatever the fuck he wants. But it's like most people don't understand what goes into that. Yeah.
Have you dived into much of like how that stuff works with that whole design world and things? Like obviously there's a few houses, if you want to call it that firms or whatever that handle that stuff. But it's like there's really only like 3 or 4.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Have you like educated yourself much on how that stuff works? Are you
totally? Because I've always, I mean, like I said, I've been paying attention to it a lot, and it's like, you know, going back to the kind of the Rossi vibe. It's like Aldo Giudi is like the king of this, you know, and like knowing what he has come to the table with and like kind of cultivated on like so many different levels is like really amazing. We worked with him on the Ducati project with Supreme. Oh, cool. And so, you know, we actually reached out to him first to do the Nikes, those crazy like clog posits. And so that was the first thing that we did. So that was already going, but that got pushed. And then we started working on the Ducati project. So you know, for me working on that project, it was super important to have someone like him to like, because, you know, a lot of people don't know who the hell that is, but it's, you know, I think what Supreme has always done an amazing job of is they kind of dish shit up that people might not know anything about, and then they use the like most real people in that world to like, and whoever the fuck wherever is going to be like, I don't know who this is, but they might look it up, and even if they don't, cool, but if they do, it's like kind of like putting people on to people who have like really spent their lives kind of like dedicated to a culture and a sport and all this stuff.
Like credibility almost.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think, to me, one of the most amazing things about this like journey in moto is meeting Aldo Judy. And not because of all the stuff that he's done, but because of the Corey, you were there the first time we met him.
Yeah.
And like there's few people that you come across that are just genuinely such amazing people that you're like kind of blown away, you know, and like,
and passionate too, which is like still after this many years, just so
for
like,
sure,
just as happy to show you the first helmet he did as
yeah,
you know, he probably was when he first finished it.
I mean, we went to Riccione in November, which is, it's like a beach town, dude. In November, it's a ghost town. There's nobody there. But we rolled in at night. We go to Aldo's office, and it's just like, it was insane, dude. It was so crazy. And yeah, you would. I kind of went there thinking that he might be like, all right,
another tour.
I'll show these guys the Rossi helmets. And then, but dude, he was so psyched and like so engaged. And it's actually a really amazing friendship and two different worlds coming together, because he appreciates you. He appreciated us like being like so hyper aware of what he's done and like so psyched to meet him that we're standing there. I remember standing there in a little group. There's like three of us and then him, and I can't remember if Stefano was there or not, but I think he was. But it was like, okay, Dan, you do design. Hey, Ryan, you do design. Ian, he kind of parties. He's like good looking. And then it's like, Corey, you're a professional racer in the U.S. Cool. Next Judy rider. You know, it was like that was like, it was insane. You know, that was so cool. So yeah, like that has been. How did we start talking about him? I forget.
Just a genuine connection.
Yeah, but no, we were talking about.
You brought him in for the Supreme thing, and then the Ducati thing, and then, you know, when you first met him in Riccone.
Yeah, but just being like the best, you know, one of the best things. That's
I forget what sent us down that path.
Credibility.
We were talking about one of those projects.
Just learning about the whole,
the
whole design thing and racing.
Right. Oh yeah. So the people that kind of run all the design shit in the MotoGP World Superbike paddock, it is a small group, and like he is kind of the foundational person there. And then you know, there's loads of people, Starline, Dave doing Mark stuff. There's a lot of people doing cool stuff. I think that it's interesting to see how that works in those worlds, you know? And yeah, it's cool to see, you know, and there's a lot of cool moments where you see cool stuff, and then sometimes it's not that cool. But I don't know, it's all subjective, you know, like it's cool to see the special liveries, the special suits, special helmets, and all. Sometimes really amazing. Sometimes it's too frequent and it doesn't feel as special. Or sometimes, like the Silverstone race was amazing.
Yeah,
like,
that was cool.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Dude, that was really cool.
Like, they should do that one.
It's like Supercross, the camo round or whatever they do every year. The military appreciate.
Totally.
That's like, I think they should do a one-off every year.
For sure.
That would
for sure. And yeah, it's interesting to see that while kind of keeping tabs on what's going on with motocross and supercross, because, you know, those dudes have different kits every weekend. Dude, but it is crazy to me that you can't then buy that kit the next week. Like,
seems
think it's-
how do they not?
I think
like-
it's starting though. Like
Yeah.
the boots, the LED.
Yeah, no,
I
they
think
are.
it's
They just
starting.
did the Jorge Martin road race boots even, which is cool.
Oh shit,
Yeah,
crazy.
so I think it's starting.
Yeah.
But you want to do more designs in those worlds, or like
For sure. Yeah. No, for sure. Myself and my good friend Ryan Geezy and Dustin Axlin have been around this whole thing too, and we've just kind of been thinking about what we could do in that space and kind of putting some thought around that. And we have some things coming up that it's a little too soon to kind of like dive into, but it's going to be super cool and super fun. You know, it's not a big deal. It's more about just like doing kind of cool shit, you know, around this
Well,
world.
I think as well, like bringing another world into, you know, motorcycling.
Yeah.
Like in that such a difference. Like we always talk about, like you take that different look on the world, and you know, you have so many ideas in your head that you've probably thrown away in your life that you're like, oh, that could be sick on, because you know, now you've got a different canvas
For sure.
to play with.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean it's super fun. Like being able to do a helmet and then like do a suit that like in the recent time has been the most childlike Christmas experiences of my life. You know what I mean? Because it's not easy to be to be able to do that, and then to get to do it, it's like so fun, you know.
And so like, all right, so we got this helmet here, but like, what's the inspiration behind it? Like,
I mean, this was just a cool idea I chucked at Corey a couple years ago. Didn't stick, but you know, it's okay. It's okay. No, we talked about it. It's been super cool talking to you about your process and like you going through what you want to do, and like the fact that you're so engaged in kind of design stuff as well. You know, I think that's kind of like a big reason why we've kind of like bonded over like both of these things. But I just like that bitmappy like digital look of a Doppler radar.
it looks like Florida, dude.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Yeah. And yeah, one of the seasons you were just kind of like kicking around ideas. I like threw that together. And then I worked on this with Aldo because I had that kind of rough idea, and then you know he said he wanted to do a helmet, and I was like blown away. So it's like him and we kind of worked on that together, which was super cool.
That's
super
really
fun.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
What do you think it's hard to take like something like that? Like, I mean, you put that in front of 90% of people and they're just not going to get it. But then you actually see it done and it's like, that's sick. Do you run into that a lot though? Like, I feel like as a creative, that's like a talent that kind of actually enables you to have that as a career, you know? Whereas like somebody else, like I could never think of that and that's why I know I could never do what you do.
Well,
like,
I think when we're thinking, well, as me and Ryan and Dustin are talking about moto stuff too, is we can come up with things that we think are cool to like dish up for people. But what's really tricky is to get someone to sign on and trust what you think is cool.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and like that is what is really difficult because and at a MotoGP level, it's difficult for a lot of different reasons, but you kind of, it's cool to like do some things here and there, but it's the real thing is to be able to get someone to like sign on and be like, hey, I really like what you do. And then being able to be like, basically kind of like tell them what should be done. You know what I mean? Which is kind of the reality of it, because otherwise you end up like ping ponging ideas back and forth, and it's like, okay, man, what do you want to do? Like, let's do it. Like, but for us, this isn't.
Stop. That's not me, dude. That is not me. I've trusted you the whole way.
We're just doing it for fun at this point and trying to ramp it up in a way, but it's like we'll do shit if we think it's cool and we can do that, you know? But it's, I think there's a lot of cool stuff to be done there. And I think that we got some cool things coming up that should be fun. And the Dainese thing is going to be really cool the next few seasons too.
The suit that Bez wore for testing was basically very similar to the design that you guys did for the custom work.
Yeah, it's the same design. They just changed the colors for testing, and they went like a step further with it. Like, so we did that suit. he came to New York right after Coda this last season, and we worked on it. We had kind of already like passed some stuff back and forth, but we like ironed it out there, and it was done and then auctioned off for charity. So he wrote it at I think Misano. Yeah, he wrote it at Misano.
World, where did you World Champions or what?
No,
No,
the
just
actual-
practice day.
Oh,
VR
okay,
46
okay,
practice
okay.
day. So he wrote it at practice day, and then they auctioned it off, and then they made him a new version of it for the tests this last week.
That's sick.
What
Yeah.
and is it piano keys? What is it?
No, it comes from a cassette tape cover.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering where I didn't know if you just started like
No,
sketching
no.
out lines.
Well,
or
I
Ryan,
something.
Ryan found that one.
Okay. It's cool.
My friend Ryan, every day I wake up to about 15 to 30 images of cool shit every single day. And like the amount of reference and just like cool shit, you know, a lot of the processes that we kind of do are looking at shit. You know, looking at as much stuff as possible, and looking at cool shit that was done, and then thinking about it in different ways. You know, yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. I know for sure our sport, in any way, shape, or form, it can be dragged into the future is best for everyone.
sure.
You know?
And I mean, I think it's looking really good, and it's like I think it'll be fun to do some stuff in it. But in general, it's like it's looking interesting.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah, definitely.
I think that the Liberty thing is going to be big, but I think trickle down too. I think World Superbike. I think Moto America. There's a lot of opportunity for things to kind of like, hopefully, kind of overlap more in a way, you know, and kind of all help each other out.
Elevate the whole
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Totally.
What do you think about the new GP logo? Last question.
Whoa,
As a designer.
interesting one. Interesting one. And this has been a hot topic in my text groups. I think it's all right. And I'll split hairs on that. They did a good job. The Pentagram, who did that and also did the Formula One stuff, did a really fucking good job. I think they did the Formula One stuff.
It kind of looks Formula One-esque.
Yeah. But what I don't like is, and this is what I keep saying, is like, should they have just called it M1? Because here's the problem: that the MOTO, I don't like, and they had it on the last logo too. I don't like. They're all the same. They're upper and lower case, but they're all kind of the same size. And then the GP is kind of cool. If you look at the icon of the app now where it says MGP, that looks great. Moto GP in the new way, it's definitely better. It looks good, but I don't love it.
Yeah.
That's splitting hairs.
Yeah.
But they needed a new logo because the Formula One logo is like an icon it's a logo.
Yeah.
MotoGP is text.
Right.
The GP is kind of a logo. And then previously it was a big logo with a little, it's always been kind of a slightly discombobulated formula. But when you see if you go to Pentagram's website and see the whole brand identity and you see the fonts and all the shit used in other ways, it looks great. It's in this microscope of that, it looks like,
Yeah. I just don't love that they said it was inspired by things, and then, but really they
the
kind
lane
of,
angle shit.
Yeah, all that.
That
shit,
was
they,
annoying.
Well, they just ripped. Those are other F1 logos that they just ripped the letters out of.
Yeah.
No,
I know, and that was interestingly that popped up on Instagram first. Did you see that? I forget who posted it, but it was them before it was even like the whole thing was announced. They were like, "Oh, this is a ripoff of this M from Formula One Managers or some shit."
Yeah.
So,
which is like, if you're gonna be inspired by something and it comes out and it's different, then that's cool. But to just like rip from the parent company is kind of like
for sure. But let's see let's see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm trying not to be a typical
No, I know
motorcyclist
it's,
that hates change.
and
you know, it's
just like anything, if you change something, people are gonna like hate on it. Like the new V4s, like people are hating on it. But
yeah.
What do you expect?
Yeah, I just feel like it's also too. It's like, it's not in America particularly. It's not household of a name enough for people to be scrolling like the Roku feed on their TV and see MGP and know what that even remotely could be.
I know,
You know,
and
you
that's
need
what.
more, like,
That's what's going to be interesting because did you see, is it Sky? But I think maybe Sky in the UK, every sprint race will be free for anyone to watch.
That's
So
huge.
if they don't kind of start doing those kind of things to like what your point just then is like, it's going to be tough because the subscription-based stuff has gotten to this point where it's like, it's almost gone full circle where people are like, let me just fucking pay YouTube. I'll pay them $75 if I can get it. It's exactly what cable television was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's gotten to that point. But I don't, there's going to be a ceiling in a way where with the paywall, and they're going to have to like work around that, which will be interesting.
Well, we're 2 hours and 33 minutes.
Dude, that's
in.
crazy.
Did you
Flies
think it would?
by.
You think it would be this long or what?
No, I haven't. No, I didn't. But it does go. It's like you guys said.
You
get locked
into a warp
in.
zone. It's the headphones.
It goes faster.
Yeah.
It was a great conversation.
Yeah,
I learned
super
I
cool.
learned so much.
Cool.
From
Yeah. No, super
thinking
fun.
you own the fucking place to actually what you do. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, man. It would have been different.
We'd be having a different conversation.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
You've listened to our pod, so you know what's coming.
Yeah.
I do know what's
You
coming.
know what's coming.
But you guys don't know what's coming.
No.
I don't have no idea actually.
I can't wait
unless
for
it's
this.
unless it's the Thai place across the street.
No, hold on. So death row. We don't know why you're. Oh, I mean, I don't know why you're on death row, but probably
Some
from
shit back in Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From fucking loitering and skating and shit. Whatever. We'll just say that.
Okay. Okay.
So you're on death row. What's your death row meal?
Well, here's what you guys are not expecting. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of criticism here because I don't love the ender here. And here's why. Partially because I live in New York City and I can eat whatever the fuck I want whenever.
Yeah.
But I'm flipping this and throwing it back at you guys. What bike would you ride last time you're ever going to ride a motorcycle?
I love that.
James
So-
gonna say a CVO road guy.
No.
He's going to say Pinarello with a bendy fork.
No, dude. I want to ride the fucking Rossi's.
A bike you've ridden or a bike you've never?
Doesn't matter.
No, Rossi's change it Repsol or the Honda. I want to ride a Repsol Honda.
Okay.
Yeah, like for sure. Like I want the MotoGP Repsol Honda exhaust out the back underneath, like the one that Nikki kind of rode. Like I think that is like one of the most iconic bikes. I think it would be so cool. I don't even care if it's good or not. I just like that would be something that would be really, really cool. The 1000, not the 800. For sure.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. I probably shot my shot early on this and probably regret it, but I've
No,
always
that's great.
I've always looked at like that being iconic.
I've never really looked at a bike and said, I wish I could ride that. It's usually a bike that I'm racing against that year that I'm like, I wish I had
But
that
that's
bike.
interesting. That's super interesting. And I think that that's something that gets talked about often too, where it's like, it would, as an experiment, it would be interesting if one series at one point did that, where there was like, changed all the bikes, made people ride different bikes just as an experiment. But anyway,
I would love that.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, honestly, I like riding the Ducati Diavolo on the street.
damn.
Bingo card there.
Damn, that was shocking. That was shocking.
I don't know. I mean, I think like a current GP bike would be sick, like the current Ducati
Totally.
for sure.
But
But
So
let
it's
me
not
ask
like
you
an
this.
old bike that I'm
Say
like.
you went to a race and you were able, or like some sort of test weekend or something like that, and it's just like when you were there. It's all of the people are there. Would you feel comfortable
No.
throwing a leg over it
No.
and having
I
to do a
wouldn't.
lap with all those people there?
No.
Oh, fuck no.
I
I would never feel comfortable even, no.
I would definitely do it 1000%.
You have to do it. If
But-
given the opportunity, you have to do it. But
But-
Anytime somebody says you got to ride a bike, like, and they're watching you ride the bike, is stressful.
yeah.
Well, and
It's gotta
like,
be.
especially like, for instance, you go in and just say Jorge Martins, right? Because he just won the championship.
Yeah.
Which factory Ducati, you roll in there, and then you just like, and then you've got like, if you look at those bikes, there's 100 fucking buttons. You now have a device that they won't even let you use, but that's the only thing I would want to feel is like, what does that fucking feel like of
Yeah.
just doing this? And then just the absurdity of doing how fast you can go, the acceleration has got to be something mind-boggling, right? Because we get used to a certain speed, but then you get on like warp speed. Right. And like, I think that would be pretty nuts. But I also, just to go on the bike thing one more time. No. So I was always brought up, like, I watch Faster.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the Red Bull 2-stroke 500 would be like, I'd be scared fucking shitless.
Yeah, those have got
to
to
just
be
high side myself fucking silly, but I just want to feel what like I just want to know what that kind of felt like.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
A 2-stroke fucking 500, like unrideable.
Yeah, no, 100% one of those would be sick.
It's hard to gauge what would be scarier riding that or like potentially wadding one of the new bikes. You know what I mean? Like,
I would definitely feel way more comfortable riding one of the new MotoGP bikes at least than the 500s, because you
it's
know
like,
you
yeah.
it's replaceable.
They got parts.
well that and like you're like bogging the thing in fourth gear and just like they're super stiff. You don't like the power band has got to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Or at least you know you've got something in your hand. Like you're probably not gonna high side the thing.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I'd say a Chevy Trucks factory Kawasaki motocross bike.
Damn. Okay.
That was like, because I grew up motocross. You know, I didn't grow up road racing. It would be cool to ride with like one of Richie's bikes. Or
No,
something.
I love watching when moto journo kind of dudes get to ride factory dirt bikes, because they geek in the same way. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, this thing's amazing, and it's kind of cooler in a way because it doesn't look like this exotic fucking thing. It looks very similar to a production bike. You know. So there's a really nuanced race machine version of something very everyday.
You know what I think's weird though? Like while we're going on this is like, well, you could ride a stock moto bike and then get on Jet Lawrence's factory bike and still be slow, right?
Yeah.
Go slower probably.
But like if you rode a stock street bike on a track day, but then you rode, just say your race bike, you would probably go faster. You know what I mean? Like you would probably go like I guess the talent to ride moto has to be so high. Like to do the obstacles and to do like to go on rowing
level.
You know what I mean? Like that it's pretty insane when you look at the two sports, when you're like
the physics involved in motocross is so insane. You know? And so different.
Oh, I think purely just the commitment level.
Yeah.
Right, so are you gonna give us a death row meal or what?
Death row.
Some Montana like grits or something like that.
I don't know, man.
Some Yellowstone like bison.
Dude, you can't be the only person on our podcast not to give us a death row meal.
Some
I ate so much last night because of this guy that I can't even think about food right now.
This guy fired up some leftovers for breakfast, dude.
It was crazy.
It was noon.
It was crazy. But I mean, it's gonna be any meal in Italy. Take me to Autogrill. Take me to Autogrill.
Espresso.
Any meal in Italy, I'll take it. I'm dead.
Is there anything that's like a drink, like a dessert in a certain part of the world that you're like, dude, that you have to?
I think the best food I ever had in my life was in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
Really?
Yeah. It was insane.
Wow.
It was so good.
That's definitely left field.
Crazy prawns that are like fucking this big, like crazy shit.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you what it was, but it was delicious. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
All right,
man. Dude. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks a lot, Tigers, Yuasa Batteries, as always, for supporting us. And I'm stoked to get you on here. Like I said, it's a different one from the normal, but getting to know you, getting to hang out with you and whatnot. It's been super cool. It's not too often get to share like common interests on multiple levels. Usually you've got like bike people and then the rest of the world.
Totally.
So
Totally.
super cool. Thanks for sitting with us in the
Thanks, you guys.
in the shop.
Yeah, dope. Thank you.
Performance. Yeah.
Yeah, baby.
All right, you guys.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks.
Dreams, I wanna see 'em